This story begins 100 years ago when a spatial rift opened on Earth, releasing fierce beasts that threatened humanity, creating a world where only those who awakened with hidden talents could survive. This is the story told by Ye Tian, an orphan whose parents were victims of this world. He survived only with his sister, being the only support for one another. However, Tian has a problem. His talent is low, which means his life is ruined. But he won't accept this and will fight at all costs to survive. This brings us to a city being destroyed by a colossal beast, with everyone escaping except Tian, who remains still, watching terrified people pass by, filled with fear, terror, and despair. His gaze turns to his arm, which emits terrifying rays with a series of glowing veins running through his body. He screams in desperation, releasing a massive wave of power. The glow fades, leaving Tian in an empty world where a small pink orb slowly descends to his face just as he wakes up in a room, confused, thinking his awakening was just a dream. He remembers how that world was invaded by dimensional beasts through a rift, which amplified the talents of humans, creating a small percentage of humanity that led the era of talents. His thoughts are interrupted by a knock on his door, and on the other side is his little sister, asking if his awakening is over. Tian hears this and takes out a magic stone to measure his new talent, which is categorized as weak, immediately realizing that his life is ruined since he doesn't have enough ability to be a warrior who can protect his sister. Just then, she enters, excited, asking how it went. He lies, pretending he has good talent, making her happy and encouraging her, promising to become a superpowered martial warrior. He looks at her, changing his expression immediately when he sees his sister, Yeyu's status window appear in front of him. She eagerly grabs his hand, ready to take him to eat. In that moment, Tian establishes his talent as compatible, asking if he wants to copy his sister's cultivation talent. Realizing that his desperate situation just changed, they go to eat, where Tian thinks about his new ability. Seeing that he cannot test it with his sister, he decides not to copy her talent. However, he notices that Yeyu's talent is much better than his, as it is Frost, a rare ability that he assumes will help him dominate his enemies. While eating, he promises his parents in heaven that they can now rest easy. Later, in the city, Tian walks, hooded, ready to test his power by activating a kind of sonar that allows him to detect someone's talent within a 3-meter radius. He is disappointed to find himself surrounded by people with low talents, none of whom are useful to him since he's looking for something of at least mid-level. He believes that the best place to find his talent is the academy, and now he can enter since he's an awakened. However, he fears that when he copies someone else's talent, his own will change. So, smiling, he seems to have a plan and heads to the Lenai base of Academy number 5, where he passes through a crowd of strong, equipped individuals, hoping to find a mid-level talent. He believes that with his ability to copy, he will become the strongest there. This marks the beginning of his first trial at the academy, where he learns that the first step to becoming a martial warrior is to be a martial apprentice, guided by a military-type teacher who assigns his students the task of creating a vortex in front of them. Among them is Tian, who remains focused while his classmates begin to faint or quit, failing the exercise except for him, who continues concentrating, determined to be the best. However, when he tries to create the vortex, he crashes into a wall and realizes that he can't create anything. He struggles to maintain focus until the teacher ends the class, recognizing them as the worst group he has ever trained, hoping they will look to a student named Chung Don as an example. Later, when asked by his classmate Sang who this person is, he explains that he is an ordinary individual who became a martial artist in a few months, so prodigious that the director himself took him as a disciple and even gave him an autograph, which he hopes will become valuable when Don gets famous enough to cover some of his expenses. This leaves Tian feeling a bit embarrassed. However, a commotion breaks out in the academy with the arrival of Chung Don, who walks smiling through the crowd of people asking for his autograph, including Sang, who rushes to get one, while Tian watches him with malice, seeing him continue greeting others, and thanking him for his support, and following him with his gaze. He is very attentive to his status screen, which marks him with a medium-level talent. So he decides to go greet him, just when Don calms everyone down by stating that the professors sent him to motivate them, not give autographs. Tian takes the opportunity to suggest that he shake hands with all of his admirers, which Don quickly accepts. The protagonist forms a line, waiting patiently for his turn, while Don continues to shake hands with several people. Finally, when his turn arrives, with a malicious look, he sees his opportunity, takes Don's hand, and unleashes more waves of energy under the gaze of everyone, confident that he will have him later. On a rainy night, Tian is in a cave on a mountain, facing the option of merging the ability he copied, doubting what will happen next. Remembering the strange dream he had upon waking up, he nervously bites his nails. Tired of thinking, he decides to leave everything to chance and starts the fusion, adopting a meditation position. Quickly, the power transforms into a brutal pressure on his chest, making him scream in pain. Crawling and not understanding why the fusion ends this way, he scratches the ground, trying to endure as his body fills with veins. A manic smile spreads across his face as the strong thunder continues to fall outside until he finally calms down. With the copied talent, he believes it's worth the pain. He observes how his system screen shows that his talent copying ability has cooled down and can be used again in 30 days, which he finds amazing, considering that it's the perfect moment to test the ability the professor showed him. He successfully creates a vortex in front of him, which is much easier than he expected. At this point, he thinks that with this ability, he will not only become a martial warrior, but an elite one, walking out of the cave with confidence. A month passes, and we see a brightly lit night in the city. Under the moonlight, a monstrous, giant wolf flies across the sky. On the street, a little girl asks her father to buy her something to eat, and the father tries to oblige. Just in the opposite direction, Tian walks past them, well aware that he must continue improving, since the person who stole his power even has private classes with the director. Meanwhile, the father promises his daughter to cook her favorite dish. In seconds, blood flies, a lamp falls, and the man's head disappears into a pool of red. This awakens Tian's senses, who turns to see a giant wolf devouring the father's head in front of his terrified daughter, while the creature eyes the girl as its next target. Tian, still in shock, watches as others around notice the creature's presence and flee in terror, while the girl continues to watch her father being devoured. Suddenly, the wolf lunges at the girl, which is when the protagonist finally reacts, saving her and trying to escape with her. But the beast is faster. From the buildings, a figure in armor and with a sword appears, cutting off the wolf's path. The beast retreats, staying still while growling. This is a knight that Tian seems to recognize, who apologizes for being late and introduces himself as Gale Wolf. He charges toward the beast, while Tian covers the girl's eyes so she doesn't see the battle. In the fight, the warrior sends the wolf flying, but it continues to return, unwilling to yield. Gale feels he cannot defeat it alone, when suddenly another voice joins the battle. 3 other figures appear from the buildings and move toward the wolf. Upon seeing them, the creature quickly escapes at full speed. The warrior admits that it was fast, but his team is here. They surround the creature, ready to land the final blow. As the wolf is pierced all over its body, only one final strike remains. But then, the wolf begins to glow red, causing its captain to order a retreat. The wolf is about to explode, sending all the attackers flying, leaving the wolf close to escaping. The protagonist shouts in alarm, but the warrior assures him not to worry, as the wolf won't be going anywhere, trusting his archer to take the perfect shot. The archer shoots directly at the wolf's head, causing it to fall to the ground. Gale arrives, boasting, and the others begin congratulating each other. However, the protagonist's attention is not on them, but on the monster. With his ability, he can see the creature's talent, but he also sees that it is still alive and moving. It gets back up to attack again, and all the warriors are alerted by their captain to retreat and reorganize. Gale tells the protagonist to take the girl to a safe place. Tian sees this as an opportunity and rushes toward the monster to touch its back and copy its talent, starting to strike it again. And again, he seems like a madman, his system telling him that he has copied the talent, his fists soaked in blood to the point that Gale has to stop him, seeing him completely out of control, making him react and realize that he succeeded in copying the talent. With this, Gale sends his companions to handle the bodies and assigns his archer the small task. He then leaves, not without first congratulating the protagonist, telling him that he hopes to see him again soon as a martial warrior with strength. This leaves the protagonist very excited. However, before going home, he washes himself to remove the traces of the monster and avoid worrying his little sister. He stares at his reflection in the mirror. He then arrives home, where he finds Wei asleep on the sofa, waiting for him to have dinner together. Now more relaxed, he admits that it was the first time he saw a monster, and it was much scarier than he had imagined. Still, while covering his sister with a blanket, he can only think of becoming a warrior to protect her. When he gets to his room, he gets comfortable and tries to clear a doubt. Can he merge with monster talents? The answer is yes, but he assumes it will be 100 times more painful than with human talent. Thinking he has no other option to become stronger, he looks at the monster's blood and speed talents at the beginner level and bites a cloth to prepare himself, starting the copy of the speed talent. Intense pain shoots through his body as he writhes, throwing himself to the ground, feeling as if each of his bones is breaking. He endures as best as he can until, at that moment, his leg twists unnaturally, causing him to scream in pain. He struggles to stand up but collapses again, thinking both his legs are broken, believing the copy failed. He looks at his shattered feet, convincing himself that this time, he's finished, lamenting failing his sister, falling asleep from the pain. When he wakes up in the morning, he gets up startled, wondering what happened. Upon looking at his legs, he finds that they're as good as new, and now he feels much lighter. He starts kicking, and just as he's enjoying it, the system interrupts to inform him that the copy was successful. At the academy, in the tree area, he tests his new abilities, jumping through the air, enjoying it, feeling like a child as he falls to the ground. He quickly changes to a more serious expression and runs at full speed to stop a leaf falling from a tree, admiring his new wolf-like powers. Then, he jumps onto a rock to do martial training, forming an orb of air in front of him, feeling that his speed is now at the level of a warrior but his energy is still lacking. He thinks about ways to solve this when Sang, who has been searching for him in the academy, appears. Immediately, Sang notices how much stronger his friend has become and asks if he wants something, offering monster blood, claiming that it will make him the strongest. Tian is surprised by this effect and regrets wasting so much blood the other day when he overdid it with the wolf. Luckily, his friend seems to have a way to get more through a new wild zone outside the city, established by the academy's high-ranking officials. It's an area used for exams for the main schools, and the reward for completing it is monster blood. Tian asks about the difficulty, and Sang says it's low since the creatures have been eliminated, leaving only their young. This convinces the protagonist to go, so Sang asks him to join his squad to conquer the area, but Tian thinks it over and prefers to go solo, which hurts Sang's feelings, as he considers it bad friendship. Despite this, they remain friends, walking together, while Tian thinks it'll be problematic to team up because his ability might be exposed. So, he decides to go alone to get the blood and advance as a martial warrior. A month later, he arrives at the academy's director, who is annoyed to see Tian wanting to participate in the exam even though he wasn't summoned. The boy insists that as a martial apprentice, he is qualified, and as a result, the director throws a paper at his face. Tian picks it up and reads that it's a life responsibility waiver, basically telling him to accept that he could die or leave and stop wasting time. This causes the boy to feel worried, but later, he walks confidently through the halls, remembering how he signed the waiver. This puts a smile on the director's face, who, seeing it as a challenge, promises that Tian will regret taking the exam. Meanwhile, Yu, who has just woken up, calls her brother to get up and eat, unaware that the food is already prepared and too much. She wonders why her brother did this until she finds a note in the kitchen saying that due to a school event, he won't be back for 3 days. This leaves her worried, hoping he's not in danger. On the other hand, in the desolate, ruined, gloomy, and dark wild area, a group walks along strange paths, among them Tian, who notices there are too many people, something his friend Sang thinks is logical since students from all 5 academies have arrived. Meanwhile, in the distance, a person laughs upon seeing someone from the 5th academy, calling them trash from a worthless academy. This is a swordsman, accompanied by his giant butler, who tells his master that in this exam, they can hunt both monsters and humans. Seeing that more is better, the swordsman, with a calculating expression, plans to have the weak ones thank him for doing it. Meanwhile, Tian notices the person, and his friend gives him information about this, being the youngest member of the family, which explains why he is so arrogant. At that moment, another figure appears, alerting everyone from the 1st academy. This is a man with a sword and a great aura, ready to fight, asking Mo Chao Bei to give him a chance to tear him apart. The heir seems to know him, as he offers him another defeat, exchanging glances. Tian wonders who he is, and his Google-like friend responds that he is Li Yun, a sword genius from the 2nd academy, whom Mo has already defeated before. The director is annoyed at how inquisitive the protagonist is, calling him illiterate. The protagonist responds by excessively cheering for Li Yun, who is surprised that the guy isn't afraid of Mo, although somewhat embarrassed by how intense he is. However, their attempts to fight are interrupted by the loudspeaker, announcing that fights are prohibited outside of the event. Li Yun steps back, promising to face his rival later, who only looks at him with disdain. Then, this same person approaches the protagonist, seeing him as brave for cheering him on and asking for his name. He gives it to him while his radar activates, revealing his talent with the knife, which catches the protagonist's attention. He extends his hand, encouraging him to beat Mo, which makes Li Yun happy. He then asks Tian to also work hard and survive. Once humans touch, the copy starts, and seconds later, the event begins with the first academy running at full speed and Mo jumping, determined. Sang returns to his academy, just like Li Yun, who wishes the protagonist good luck before leaving. Alone, Tian moves quickly to the deepest part of the forest to begin his skill fusion, which quickly fills every part of his body with intense pain. However, this time he only smiles, determined to get stronger. With a great flash, he exits the forest, feeling like new, ready to test his sword skills, slicing through several trunks in a single cut. This makes him feel ready to leave when, at last, the loudspeaker announces the entrance of the 5th Academy, with everyone prepared to go. And so, they descend into the desolate city, and Tian senses the presence of a creature in the area. There's a huge serpent about to attack him. Preparing himself, he leaps at the monster, and with a single sword movement, he strikes its head. The creature falls to the ground, and Tian collects a small orb that seems to be his point accumulation. Surprised by how weak the monsters in the area are, he stores the orb, noticing that the rules indicate the more he eliminates, the higher his rank will be, needing many more to reach the first place. Complaining about the long way ahead, he starts by hunting more beasts, jumping to move between buildings. A desperate cry for help halts him. From above, he sees a completely terrified person surrounded by wild wolves, watching as one rushes toward him. Tian decides to use arrows to take down the wolf, landing in the middle of the battlefield and surprising his friend, asking if he can take the points. However, Sang tells him to flee, as he's no match for the wolves. To this, Tian responds by launching himself at full speed into the middle of the wolves, who try to attack him. Tian calmly draws his sword and, with a simple cut, slashes all 3 wolves to pieces, leaving his friend amazed as he watches the massacre from afar. Once everything is calm, Tian collects the wolf fangs, asking his friend for permission. Clearly knowing that without him he wouldn't have made it, and seeing him so injured, the protagonist asks if he will continue, but Sang has already given up, both for himself and his teammates who are scattered and unconscious across the field, hoping at least to get them out alive. Seeing that that's all he can do, he decides to leave. Before that, his friend warns him about a pseudo-beast he should be cautious of, which is considered the most dangerous creature in the area. It seems to be a 10-meter serpent that the 1st Academy was hunting, and according to Sang, it should be worth about 500 points. This puts a smile on Tian's face, who insists on knowing its location. Sang gives him the direction, and the protagonist dashes off, confident that with those 500 points, he'll reach first place. As he leaves, his friend watches with concern. Tian runs through the buildings, but he stops when he sees something. It's essentially a massacre of students, identifiable by their uniforms as members of the 1st Academy. In the distance, a giant blaze spreads from a location where he recognizes the pseudo-beast's lair. However, he launches at full speed to reach a building, where he observes the massive fire and the ruins of the battle. Surprised, he sees the pseudo-beast, a colossal muscular demon with a serpent's tail, still fighting more students from the 1st Academy, led, or rather ordered, by Mo continues sending his teammates to kill the beast and take the points. They all try to strike, but they fail. Mo's servant tells him the beast is ready for the final blow, and Mo rushes in to attack, jumping at full speed with a confident smile, hitting the creature's head, thinking he's won, until the beast knocks him far away, crashing into a building. Although in pain, Mo smiles, believing he's secured the points. The creature writhes in pain, and Tian, irritated, watches the scene, realizing he lost the kill by arriving late. With everything calm again, Mo returns confidently, being congratulated by his servant and teammates while smiling, sure he is first place. However, the creature opens its eyes, rising aggressively, changing color, and unleashing its power. With a tail swing, it sends several students flying. Mo, worried, watches as the creature releases a blood explosion, transforming into a full monster. This only convinces him to send his teammates to search for it, assuming it's worth more than 1,000 points. Surprised, everyone rushes to chase the points, led by Mo, who thinks that with all the damage dealt to the creature, they cannot let anyone else take the kill. At that moment, someone is watching his target, deciding to get in position to use his maximum speed talent, soaring through the air and traveling between the buildings until he finally lands on one. From there, he continues more slowly, noticing that no one has arrived yet, following the monster's trail, which leads him to an old warehouse, where he knows he will find the 1,000 points. Inside, he tracks the serpent's essence, which leads him directly to meet the enormous creature in the shadows. It is drinking small drops of a silver substance, which Tian knows well isn't just water. Unsheathing his sword, he downplays the situation and goes for his points, launching into an all-out attack, thinking he has everything under control. However, the creature turns to face him with a smile, responding to the attack and sending him flying. Tian realizes the monster is very fast, flying through the air, and decides to use his bow and arrows, making a shot that lands perfectly in its eyes. He then grabs his weapon while still airborne, taking the opportunity to strike back, landing on the monster's arm, causing significant damage and shouting to give it his all before moving towards its head to finish it off. The monster ends up in a large puddle of pink liquid, falling to the ground along with the protagonist, who smiles, admitting that he sweated to defeat it, confessing he wouldn't have managed it if not for the fatigue caused by the First Academy. Now, his attention shifts to the strange liquid the monster had been drinking, which he decides to store in a jar for later investigation. He also has another problem to deal with, mounting the monster's corpse to remove one of its eyeballs as proof of his victory. He also extracts valuable blood from its heart. Once he has what he needs, he looks at the strange liquid but, unsure of what it is, decides to ensure it is not found, eliminating the source where it had been dripping. With his objectives completed, he plans to return later. Arriving at the location of the First Academy, he finds the monster's lifeless body, now devoid of blood, eyes, and heart, just an inert corpse left behind. The servant, confused, asks what should be done, and the furious leader can only curse the thief who took his prey. The protagonist, meanwhile, hides in the shadows, waiting for the First Academy to exit the warehouse. They are furious, quietly searching for the thief, while Mo is tasked with investigating all the subjects they find. Tian, however, chooses to remain stealthy, quickly escaping the area, moving through the rubble, knowing that sooner or later, they'll find him, especially after he hands over the proof once the event is over. That's why he decides to use the remaining 3 days to cultivate his strength. He reaches a place ruined enough to serve as a hideout and sits to think about using the monster's blood. After drinking a few drops, he realizes it's the worst thing he's ever tasted, but that doesn't stop him. Motivated by the desire to become the strongest and protect his sister, he drinks it in one go. This causes his sister to sneeze, thinking maybe her brother is thinking of her while she's at school. Returning to the protagonist after drinking the blood, he begins emitting a green aura that boosts his growth power. He wonders if this is why people like Qindong and others are so strong and decides to use it to develop his skills in the remaining 2 days, considering all the blood he has to drink. The event concludes, and everyone returns to present their points. Among them, Li Yun confidently places his points on the table, totaling 195, which astonishes everyone. However, Mo quickly arrives with his entourage to mock him and his teammates, deeming them unworthy of challenging him. Mo shows his points, which total 427, again shocking everyone, except Yun, who believes it's impossible to reach such a number unless points were stolen from others. Mo proudly admits to stealing them using his ability against the weak, which further infuriates his rival. The director congratulates him for first place, but Mo is still waiting for the one who stole his 2,000 points. However, the person counting the points hasn't seen anyone else leave, assuming that if they haven't left, it's likely they didn't survive. This seems to please the director, unaware that Tian is approaching from the desolate wasteland, showing his proof on the table. The person counting is astonished upon seeing the monster's eyes, which gives Tian a score of 100 points, winning the event and taking home the prizes, 3 monster blood vials and 100,000 yen. Li Jun is amazed, and Mo is furious upon recognizing Tian as the thief, demanding that his assistant gather all information about him. Mo then greets his friend for bringing glory to the 5th Academy, though he notices that it doesn't make his director happy. The reason is that when you mess with a family like Mo's, it's highly likely that the protagonist will appear out of nowhere, dead. This worries his friend, and that's how the event ends, with the award ceremony where everyone smiles on the podium, encouraged by their fellow teammates. At that moment, Mo, upset about the alleged theft, confronts Tian. Tian responds by basically saying that he too was a thief, which, according to Li Yun, is exactly the same excuse Mo used, hiding behind his ability. This infuriates Mo, who seems to go on the offensive, determined to prove who is the strongest. Tian accepts the challenge gladly, understanding that, in his current situation, there is no way to escape. His only option is to become strong enough that no one dares to look down on him. That afternoon, Tian returns home, greeted by his excited younger sister, who is worried about his condition. She checks him thoroughly to confirm he's in one piece and then prepares a surprise for him, his prizes. Yu is amazed and jokes that with all the money he won, Tian can now get married. However, the protagonist has no such plans, and he gives her the money for school and expenses, both of them excited, though he doesn't fully understand what it is. So, he picks up an illustrated book of treasures to discover it with his brother, eagerly joining in her reading. After reading for a while, they find that the strange stone is called Elixir of Earth. Core is an earth beta that has absorbed the primordial key of the sky and earth for 100 years. According to the book, it only works for lower or intermediate level talents, assuming there might be other elixirs for higher levels. Tian reflects on how useful such an object could be, until his sister interrupts, asking him to take it to become stronger. But he seriously tells her that he doesn't need it, as he has another plan to make her stronger, asking her to be the one to drink it, leaving Au amazed. She's confused and looks at the elixir, remembering that she still hasn't awakened her talent. Her brother confidently says that it won't be a waste if she drinks it, while he checks her status window. Yu's cultivation talent is low, so the elixir could increase it, although he doesn't know by how much. Meanwhile, Yu, excited, prefers to try and sell the object to make more money, but Tian knows no one will trust that sale because the elixir must have come from a spiritual earth energy stone that was already destroyed, so she won't be able to show it to potential buyers. Selling it would only cause problems and suspicion. Yu, sulking from the lost opportunity, insists that they sell it, but Tian, determined, believes it would be a waste not to use it. So, he quietly approaches his sister from behind, taking the elixir and trying to make her drink it. Yu complains and accuses him of trying to send her to San Pedro, the afterlife, though her resistance is in vain as she ends up drinking it, thinking maybe she made a mistake or the book lied. Tired, she decides to go to sleep. Tian stays, meditating, waiting to see if the elixir takes effect. After an hour, something seems to have changed, feeling a sudden boost in her talent. He looks at his sister, who is still asleep, and her status window shows that her cultivation talent has gone up to an intermediate level, increasing by 2 degrees, and her ice talent has also improved. This makes Tian think about the great future she has as a martial artist, and with this evolution, he feels more confident. He's no longer worried about the monster blood he drank earlier, which he softened with fried foods, and checks how much his power has increased this time, discovering that it's now 8 times greater than before. Realizing the talent he gained from the beast is truly terrifying, he also realizes that if he had more blood, he could keep advancing until becoming a martial artist. However, he only has 2 bottles left, which makes him think about how to get more. Days pass, and we see Tian meditating in the forest of the academy. 10 days later, he's meditating so calmly that even birds land on him. However, his peace is interrupted by Sang, who arrives running, flustered, mentioning his main problem. This terrifies Tian, who thinks his rival has come for revenge. Fortunately, his friend turns out to be overreacting, only informing him that Mo is confined to his room, planning to use the heart blood, the low-ranked beast blood, and the venomous snake blood, reflecting that with this, he can't break through as an apprentice. However, he trusts his speed and sword skills will allow him to fight against a martial artist. Meanwhile, at Mo's family mansion, inside a house, a huge reinforced door begins to crack and eventually shatters into pieces. From the shadows emerges a powerful figure. It's Mo, who is congratulated by his servant for having reached the martial artist level. Now Mo exudes an imposing aura. At that moment, his father, Mohen, enters, surprised that his son has finally fulfilled his promise of becoming a warrior. Mohen, one of the ancient gods in the middle-tier martial artist group, is very pleased with his son's achievements. Mo thanks him, bowing and promising not to dishonor the family name. Mohen, happy, asks his assistants if the honor banquet for his son is ready. Upon confirmation, he heads to the venue, bidding farewell to Mo, who is now free to continue with his plans. Mo takes this opportunity to ask his butler if he has investigated the protagonist. The answer is yes. The boy is basically an orphan with no background, which implies they can do whatever they want with him. This surprises the young man, who was expecting to find something that justified Tian's strength. But with this information, Mo orders his servant to find and eliminate the orphan. However, The butler warns that unlike the wild area, they can't get rid of someone without facing consequences outside of it. Mo responds that they can avoid problems by hiring a dark shadow mercenary. Although the butler agrees it's a feasible plan, he points out it would be too costly for a simple boy. Mo then makes a classist comment saying that poor people always think like poor people, adding that rich families like Lini maintain their power by eliminating any genius among the regular people, exemplifying this by breaking a cup. The butler, understanding that according to Mo's thinking, the Fifth Academy can't have a genius, gives a sadistic speech about the survival of the fittest. Meanwhile, in the small forest of the Fifth Academy, Tian is moving at high speed, breaking a giant rock into pieces. Exhausted from his training, he decides to head home before it starts raining. Walking through the city in the rain, Tian suddenly stops, almost paralyzed, upon seeing something incomprehensible in the distance, an activated status window floating in the air. It belongs to Li Kuan, who has a low cultivation talent and a novice shadow talent. Suddenly, a huge shadow descends rapidly, attempting to surprise Tian. He blocks the attack and confused, he asks who it is. The shadow coldly responds that it is his executioner. Tian watches from a distance as Li Kuan, enveloped in power, makes it clear that he will eliminate him. Tian deduces that it's a mercenary sent by Mo and wonders why, being a martial artist, he would choose to eliminate him in this way. At that moment, the ninja leaps through the air, preparing to attack directly. Tian deflects the attack at the last moment, but his enemy goes invisible again. Tian, alert, tries to prevent the next attack that comes from his back, directly at his neck. Astonished, he has no choice but to unleash his own talent, moving out of the mercenary's reach and positioning himself on top of a building. This surprises Li Kuan, who wonders how an apprentice can move so fast. The protagonist then launches his own attack, charging at the enemy at full speed, leaving him no chance to escape, using his sword and releasing a devastating cut that destroys everything in his path but doesn't reach Li Kuan, who escapes, becoming invisible. This frustrates Tian, who finds that this skill is annoying and complicated for normal people but useless against him. He attacks with speed, causing a mortal wound, and Li Kuan falls to the ground, bleeding, unable to comprehend how someone so weak could see through his technique. Tian, approaching angrily, says he'll explain how he did it if he first tells him who sent him. Li Kuan agrees, but as he exhales his last breath, he launches a surprise attack. However, Tian easily dodges it and counterattacks, piercing the mercenary with his sword. When he asks who sent him, the defeated Li Kuan admits it was Mo. With this, Tian pulls out his sword, letting the dying mercenary fall to the ground, then approaches to copy his power, enveloped in a green aura, proclaiming that his enemy's talent now belongs to him. And so the rain continues, the lightning strikes, and Liam's horrified face remains as his last trace in the improvised grave that Tian begins to cover with rocks, with the strong wind stirring the falling leaves in front of the protagonist, who reflects that humans should not fall like leaves torn by the wind or rain. Picking up the leaves from the ground, squeezing them tightly, they would also go after her, and without hesitation, she jumped out the window, moving between the buildings while praying her sister was safe. She quickly arrived at Ye Tian High School. She jumped out the window, moving between the buildings while praying her sister was safe. She quickly arrived at Ye Tian High School, where she desperately searched for her sister. Thinking that no mercenary would eliminate a regular person in a place like this, but doubting how far Mo could go, she felt a threatening shove from behind. With a quick reaction, she positioned herself behind the attacker, threatening them, only to realize it was her sister carrying an umbrella. Somewhat confused but relieved, she asked why she had left school so late. She explained that she stayed to clean the classroom and then opened her umbrella to leave, scolding him for being soaked and barefoot while they walked in the rain. But they were being watched from a distance by a luxurious limousine. From inside, Mo observed with annoyance as Tian was still alive while the protagonist bought sausages with his sister. Both disliked it as they walked home, deciding what to have for dinner. The black limousine kept following them. Tian noticed it but kept walking calmly until they reached home, where his sister informed him that dinner was ready. However, he remained nervous, observing how the limousine stayed parked in front of their house. The next day, Yeyu was in class, and from a nearby building, Tian watched, seeing how the car had been following his sister persistently for 3 days. Furious at the thought they might harm his sister, he decided to act. However, finally the car drove off and the roles reversed. Now Tian followed it, flying between the buildings. He reached a desolate warehouse and saw a man get out of the car and enter. Determined, Tian dropped to the ground, thinking he would face his rival inside. A man was being brutally beaten by Mo's henchmen. The man begged for more time to repay the money he owed, but Mo, who turned out to be a loan shark, doubled the interest on his debt every day. Despite the man's pleas that he had many people to care for, he was interrupted by the butler, Deo. For the eccentric young man's misfortune, the butler had no information about the shadowy assassin they had hired. Tian, in invisible mode, watched, annoyed by how the wealthy man vented his frustration on the debtor with a brutal kick. Tian felt scammed by the mercenary and his butler. Kneeling, the butler apologized and swore loyalty, while another assistant removed the debtor's lifeless body. Bo then asked what they would do with Tian's sister. Very attentive, Tian listened to the butler, who said they would hire a friend recently released from prison. But now, Mo preferred to handle things personally. Tian's nerves increased at the thought of the crazy boy facing his sister, and suddenly Mo, with a sadistic smile, hit him so hard he fell to the ground. Tian asked why, and the cruel Mo answered that it was punishment for failing. At that moment, Tian jumped from the shadows, invoking his new weapons. Mo, unprepared, didn't see the strike coming. Blood splattered on the protagonist's smiling face. With a bloody hand, and the terrified screams of the guards, Tian observed the decapitated body of his master. The butler tried to understand what was happening, recognizing the shadow skill and assuming it was the mercenary. However, emerging from the shadows was a formidable Tian, with a big smile. This terrified the butler, who had always considered him weak. When asked about Likuan, the protagonist, smiling, moved at full speed and appeared in front of the butler, slashing him with a fatal blow. With this act, Tian cleaned his weapon, threw a handkerchief with a written note on the ground, and stored his weapons. He looked at the few survivors who were dying on the floor and told them they had tormented the wrong man. With a triumphant smile, he left the place and disappeared into the streets of the city. An hour later, several cars arrived at the scene, one of which carried Moan, who clenched his fists in rage until he exploded, screaming at the tragic fate of his son. One of his men handed him the bloody handkerchief with the same symbol of the shadow assassin. Seeing it, Moan interpreted it as an insult, but he was interrupted by the arrival of Mo Chong, the great elder and the only martial warrior of the family. This title was above martial warrior and elite martial warrior, just below the grandmaster. Upon his presence, Moan knelt and informed him that his prodigious heir had been exterminated. The elder examined the scene and asked for an explanation. Moan, from the floor, lamented, explaining that his son had reached the rank of martial warrior and that they had just celebrated his achievement, convinced that his son would lead them to the top. But now everything was lost. The elder understood his pain, as he too had placed his hopes on that young man, believing he would become the second great master of the family, taking them even higher, thus ensuring his position as the family's great hope. Through tears, Moan begged the elder to avenge his son, handing him the handkerchief of the shadow assassin. Mo Chong received it, surprised, reflecting that perhaps a rival family had hired the organization. He then examined the fabric under the moonlight, carefully unfolding it until he discovered a hidden message revealing the name Iron Fong. The next day, Sang explained to the protagonist that the Iron Fong base was much stronger than their Linai base. He told him that the great elder of the Mo family suspected that families within their base were conspiring to overthrow him, intending for it to be absorbed by Iron Fong. The plan started by eliminating talented heirs like Mo, who completely lost his mind. Tian feigned surprise as he listened to this, while his companion recognized him as a lucky guy, since Mo had been after him. The protagonist, smiling, was happy no one suspected him, having left the handkerchief of the shadow assassins on the ground to distract them. However, he didn't know that Mo Chong would find the symbol of the Iron Fong base, triggering this problem. It could also be a plan by the elder to create conflict between the bases. At 4 in the morning the next day, Tian got up and prepared, stealthily getting ready to leave. However, he failed to avoid being seen as Yeyu, still asleep, found him. She asked him where he was going, and he responded that he was heading to the wilderness to get stronger. Yu, worried, reminded him that he had just returned from there and was planning to go alone again, suggesting that he at least find companions to join him. Tian asked her not to worry and promised he would return safely. But Yu, running towards him, hugged him tightly from behind, pleading for him to take care. Tian accepted, promising that he would be fine. He arrived in the desert where, according to rumors, many high-level monsters lived. Though he knew he couldn't yet face them, his goal was to hunt the lower-ranked ones while sneaking around, determined to become a martial warrior. However, an earthquake interrupted him, caused by a gigantic monster nearby, a heavily armored bull with low-level defense talent, which immediately caught the boy's interest. While Tian observed the monster, he didn't realize it had him in its sights, and suddenly the bull charged at full speed. Tian quickly dropped his gear and prepared for the impact, activating his speed, releasing his souls, and jumping like a whirlwind to gain momentum for a clash with the monster. When the bull activated its defense ability, it proved much more resistant than Tian had expected. Furthermore, the bull's ability became offensive, releasing all its energy and throwing Tian into the air. Tian recognized his opponent's excellent talent and claimed the power as his own. The bull charged again at full speed, and Tian, smiling with determination, freed his weapons, claiming the monster's talent as his own and flying straight for its head, targeting the eyes, the weak spot of all creatures. However, his swords were stopped by the bull's barrier, forcing him to retreat. He noticed the impact had cracked his sword, surprised that a talent considered weak could be so strong. Things got worse when the bull launched a second attack, shattering one of Tian's swords, scattering fragments into the air. A powerful punch from the bull sent Tian crashing into the rocks, leaving him wounded. Tian got up, still shocked by the incredible talent of his enemy, which he desired at all costs. However, his skill was still cooling down, and he was confused because the bull seemed stronger than other higher-level monsters he had already defeated. Deciding to take advantage of the bull's large size to find its weak point and attack it stealthily, he dropped his weapon and activated his green aura, marking his only chance to win by becoming invisible. He began attacking, but every strike rebounded without causing any damage. Despite the effectiveness of his shadow ability, the bull didn't even notice the attacks because it didn't feel them. Exhausted and unable to find a weak spot, Tian observed that the bull's defense talent had no openings. Finally, giving up, he sat down but noticed something from an angle. The monster didn't protect its tail well. With nothing to lose, he decided to attack that area, using his dark assault ability to literally break the beast's rear, causing it to scream in pain before collapsing into a pool of purple blood. From above, Tian admired how he had defeated the monster. Later, he examined the bull's lifeless body, discovering that it was as fragile as any other carcass. He collected 3 bottles of its blood, reflecting that, like everything in life, talents lose their value after death. Nonetheless, he decided to make the most of the bull's skin, lower parts, and any other useful body parts, starting with its horns. After gathering everything in his backpack, he began searching for a quiet place to continue cultivating. In a dark cave, he prepared his meal, a mixture of monster blood and peanuts to improve the taste. Hoping this method would help him become a martial warrior, he started drinking the blood and eating the peanuts while focusing, eventually creating a huge orb of power in front of him. 20 days passed in the filthy, dark cave, and during the flashes of power emanating from his body, Tian began laughing frantically. His hair had grown, and his eyes shone as he unleashed his power with a loud scream, marking the moment when he released all his energy, destroying parts of the cave. The rumble caught the attention of 2 girls watching from a distance. One of them, surprised, commented that it was strange for someone to cultivate their talent in such a barren place. Her companions smiled at this, ensuring the martial pavilion brooch was secure. Inside the cave, Tian felt the flow of power had officially brought him to the martial warrior level. Noticing that 20 days had passed, he prepared to seek the armored bull's talent and copy it. Returning to the desert, he tried to extract the bull's talent from its skeleton, but failed when he discovered the incomplete body made it impossible. This mistake made him regret tearing the bull apart. Meanwhile, high above, the 2 girls continued watching him, convinced that Tian was responsible for defeating several monsters in the area, though they couldn't understand how someone who had just reached the martial warrior level could have done such a thing, considering the skeletons had been eliminated for much longer. The girls kept following him until he reached a river. Without noticing their presence, Tian took off all his clothes to take a dip before returning home. Excited to see him naked, the girls quickly decided to leave to avoid looking like perverts. Later, in the Linai market, Tian walked through the stalls, looking for something interesting, and came across a shop that caught his attention, the martial pavilion. Just then, the 2 girls passed by, and the blonde one recognized him. Tian, upon turning to look at her, was astonished, mistaking one of them for you. He called her little sister, or at least he thought she was, but after seeing her clearly, he was confused. This also confused the girl, who quickly turned to walk away but glanced back at him. He realized that the girl he mistook for Yu was Yelin, a true genius with mid-tier cultivation talent, sword talent, and speed. Her strange comment didn't go unnoticed, and the blonde girl became annoyed because Tian called her little sister, insulting him by calling him a garbage collector. This hurt the protagonist's ego, who thought that perhaps he hadn't bathed properly. The girl, Link, nearly spoke out of turn, but her companion, Koyu, stepped in to give Tian instructions on what to say. This time, Tian apologized to the girl, and Link took the lead, dragging him to the store and revealing that their boss was in charge of the Martial Pavilion. As compensation for the insult, they offered to buy anything he was selling for double the price. Tian, amazed, was taken to the store, where he admired the items, which were exactly what he had expected from the biggest store in the area. As he was served tea and shown the items he had brought to sell, they offered him 200,000 yuan. But as promised, they gave him 400,000 yuan. Tian happily accepted the deal, thrilled by the easy money he made, delivered in cards. He thought to himself that this money would surely make his sister very happy. He also received another offer as part of the compensation. Every item he bought from the Martial Pavilion would be half price. Seeing that the items were extremely expensive, he realized how complicated it was for ordinary people to buy them at such prices. This made him think that it was one of the reasons why the main families remained in power. Still, he decided to buy some books. With much monster blood, paying with a gold card he obtained from the mercenary he sent to heaven with everything paid for and packed, the protagonist begins to suspect that he is receiving too many benefits for just one insult, assuming there is something more behind it all. However, he prefers to take advantage of it and leave as soon as possible. But before he reaches the door, Eu stops him with a gesture. The pavilion supervisor wants to meet him. Intrigued, Tian accepts and asks her to guide him. Eu takes him to a room where Lin is waiting, drinking tea. Recognizing the protagonist as the person she saw in the mountains, she surprises Tian by offering him a handshake. She introduces herself as Lin from the Demon Base, an elite martial artist at the peak stage. As their hands touch, Tian also introduces himself, having unwittingly copied her intermediate cultivation level talent. Later, he sits at the table, confused, because unlike the nobles and powerful people invited to the second level of the pavilion, he is just a plebeian. However, Lin wants him precisely because of those connections. Her cold and serious words, along with her gaze, make the protagonist see a great similarity, but also a great difference between her and his cheerful sister, who serves him tea. Lin then gets to the point, placing a red light on the table and asserting that she will be direct with him, asking him to join her martial arts hall. However, the seriousness of the girl is overshadowed by the hallucination of her little sister saying those words, which makes it very difficult to reject her. Smiling, she asks why he hesitates, surely having many talented individuals in her base to require a martial warrior so inexperienced. Lin stands up and, looking out the window, explains that a large base can become even bigger, not because they lack talented individuals but because they are always looking for talent. This intellectual blow leaves Tian amazed, wondering how such a young girl has such mature thinking, as he expected from a base leader, admitting that his little sister could never reason something like this. Lin tries to hurry the protagonist's decision, telling him that he has a unique opportunity, one that many of the elite would want, and that no one has achieved yet. Tian still hesitates, seeing it as a good opportunity, but if he accepts, he will be restricted by the organization, risking death if they discover his ability. Lin, for her part, sits next to him on the table and asks why he doubts. Tian smiles, admitting that it's really hard for him to reject that face. Under her insistence, he admits that he has no idea why he hesitates, thinking about the rumors about the base Linai and the Iron Fang base in the chaotic battle they unleashed for power, and concludes that none of that helps in his peaceful life, not intending to serve people like them. Lin then asks if that includes her. For Tian, it's difficult to exclude her. She then asks him to observe her and agrees not to receive an immediate answer, exchanging silent looks. Later, in the village, Tian is thinking about what a martial artist is, what talent is, and how once it manifests, martial artists really continue remembering their duties, walking through different parts of the village, thinking that their duty is the safety of the citizens. However, when he sees how the children play football happily until their ball reaches a guard's feet, who explodes the ball, crushing it, the protagonist thinks that it should be enough for them to fear the monsters, but they must also live with the intimidation of martial warriors. This is something Tian reflects on from the top of a building, admitting that he can't do anything yet. Still, he is determined to become stronger to do so. Seeing his status screen, he is asked if he wants to merge with his new ability. He presses yes, making the decision. Thus, Tian returns home, where his sister, surprised, happily runs to hug him, noticing that he is even more muscular. She tells him that he is officially a martial artist, which astonishes his sister, who starts shouting and jumping with excitement, making a scene. Tian thinks she is over-exaggerating, knowing that when she awakens her talent, she will also become a martial artist and look for ways to become even stronger. The celebration ends when his sister decides to help her favorite martial artist not look like a beggar. With scissors in hand, she sits him in a chair to cut his hair. Tian nostalgically remembers how, since their parents passed away, his sister always helped him with his hair, having a flashback when they were little and his sister trembled nervously, thinking she wouldn't be able to cut his hair. At that time, he suggested going to the hospital, but not for his hair, but because little Tian was completely beaten up, thinking it wouldn't be worth spending money on doctors, asking her to only cut his hair and cover his wounds. She drops the scissors, crying, thinking that if her brother had the ability of the immortal jellyfish Turritopsis nutricula, a complicated wordplay the protagonist doesn't remember, it would be a fairy tale she used to tell her sister. This ability was one of regeneration, and he immediately tells her it's false, making the little girl throw a tantrum. To calm her down, he tells her that perhaps when she awakens her talent, she might have that power, smiling and telling her that one day, she would never be hurt again, and he would protect her. In the present, Tian jumps out of the chair, finally remembering that story, teasing his sister for ruining his haircut. But she doesn't mind and keeps jumping around excitedly until she finds the treasure book he brought. He discovers that the jellyfish with the exaggerated name does exist, living in the lake of death. His sister, worried about his habit of talking to himself, just watches him. Tian decides to look for the jellyfish to copy its talent and avoid making his sister worry about him. Although she believes it's just a children's tale, he assures her it's real. His sister, excited, congratulates him, and he insists that she finish cutting her hair later. Tian keeps reading, this time about the forging talent, discovering that it can be cultivated according to its level, dividing it into skin forging for beginners, muscle forging for intermediates, and bone forging for advanced martial warriors. He starts cultivating the skill, advancing easily, then adds more monster blood, triggering an energy boost that triples his cultivation speed. Determined to perfect this technique, he waits for the cooldown period, with 30 days left to search for the Medusa in the Lake of Death. Days pass, and Tian arrives at the Martial Pavilion, where Sia greets him with a big smile until she recognizes him as the garbage collector. She rushes to greet him, sure that he's looking for his master. Tian tells her he's not there for that, just to make some purchases. Looking her straight in the eyes, Sia gets nervous as she notices how handsome he looks after his makeover. She lets him through to the shopping area, where Tian directly asks her where the map of the Lake of Death is. The girl searches for it and hands it to him, thrilling the protagonist, who pays and leaves, determined to find that great talent. She remains thinking that he'll probably go back to collecting garbage, but then remembers that the lake is dangerous, even for elite warriors, and she worries for him. So, Tian arrives at the lake, which he recognizes as eerie, hoping to find a good talent to copy. He also notices it feels like a ghostly place, with a strange atmosphere indicating danger, and he's not wrong. Before he can even finish thinking, a gigantic whirlwind appears, destroying the place. The protagonist prefers to observe, hiding with his shadow skill and retreating as far as possible. He climbs high enough to see the entire lake, where in the center, he spots a giant orb inside, distinguishing two figures, an elderly man flying with an umbrella and Ling, carrying a treasure. Tian recognizes them just before a massive monster emerges from the lake. The elderly man shouts that it's too late, barely escaping the bite of the water dragon. On land, they see they are facing a fierce high-level beast, which begins to rise from the water, astonishing the protagonist with the distance it covers. The elderly man decides to distract the creature so the girl can escape. She doesn't want to leave but has no choice, especially when other monsters appear, surprising both of them. Lin escapes, terrified, with the monsters almost catching her, and the protagonist reluctantly accepts that he will have to help, charging at full speed. The beast also runs at full speed, determined to catch her. The elderly man shouts desperately to alert the lady, who just jumps before being devoured, beginning to glow, activating her secret technique that releases a pink tattoo on her forehead and her weapon. This triggers her transformation, changing her appearance and hair color to pink, disappearing from the creature's sight. It searches in all directions while she, from the air, launches herself, cutting it in two with brutal strikes, passing by so quickly that she nearly knocks over a surprised Tian. who quickly retreats to observe from above, realizing that, as a novice, he would be of real help in that fight. As he watches Ling continue slicing and cutting the monster brutally, he sees her as an elite warrior, swiftly exterminating the creatures and leaving a scene of destruction that makes him admit that not even 10 people of his level could land a scratch on the girl. Meanwhile, the giant dinosaur continues fighting with the elderly man, who is captured by the leg, the monster crushing it and making him scream in pain. In agony, the elderly man tells the lady to escape while she can, being in a terrible position, about to be devoured with no chance of escape. He insists that her secret technique won't last much longer and begs her to take the EMS. She, full of emotion, keeps eliminating more creatures but hears the elderly man begging her not to let the sacrifices of his brothers be in vain. These are his last words before he is swallowed. With tears in her eyes and filled with power, she curses the event. From above, she hears how many have died for that treasure, wondering how interesting it would be. Meanwhile, Lin finally decides to escape with the monsters very close to her. However, she suffers a huge power rebound when her technique ends, the pink rose on her forehead falling to the ground with force, dropping the treasure, which bounces until it reaches the protagonist's feet. Surprised, he picks it up. The girl, confused and with blurry vision, screams at him to leave it. Though she has no strength left, Tian uncomfortably replies that he wouldn't steal it, and then picks her up, suggesting they seek refuge in a cave. As she loses consciousness, Tian interprets her silence as agreement and runs at full speed, far from there. In a safe place, he sets up camp with the still unconscious girl while observing her, noting that she looks identical to his sister, except for a mole next to her eye, which he tried to erase to confirm it was real. Now, being sure she isn't his sister, time passes. Tian starts to worry about the girl who hasn't woken up yet, hoping she will soon. He approaches to check on her when she begins to wake up, and he steps back, feeling embarrassed. She, now conscious, recognizes the protagonist, surprised that he saved her, but he emphasizes that he only found her by coincidence, feeling a bit awkward. This is heightened when she thanks him for covering her with his jacket and returns it. Meanwhile, she thinks the boy is very confident in himself for making it alone to the dead lake, and as she observes him closely, she concludes that he must have this kind of talent for the martial pavilion. Determined to recruit him, she releases a light stone that illuminates the whole area, blinding the protagonist because of its brightness. Smiling, she explains that it's a stone that absorbs light and can be used as a lantern. He shows interest in asking where she got it, and proudly, Ling continues to boast about her things, pulling out a recovery potion. This leaves Tian with doubts about the origin of the objects, speculating that it could be some kind of spatial talent, although her status window shows nothing. Remaining alert, he meditates on it. Later, once she's recovered, she asks the protagonist to sit down so she can explain where she gets her objects. She shows him a huge wooden box with treasure in one hand and a small bag where everything fits, even the chest. This is recognized as a rare spatial type item, making the boy very excited. Ling uses this opportunity to promise to teach him how to use it if he joins the martial pavilion. However, the boy completely ignores this and prefers to sleep, which infuriates her because she doesn't plan to give up. Meanwhile, he reflects that once he copies spatial and recovery talents, a bag and a potion won't be very useful, and his main problem is that the girl stirred up the dead lake, making his search harder. So, he falls asleep, and when he wakes up in the morning, he finds himself alone with no trace of Ling. However, he does find a chest containing a book with intermediate forging techniques, 10 bottles of monster blood, and 10 million in cards. Grateful, he thanks the girl for leaving him everything needed to become an elite martial artist. With this, Tian changes his plans and decides to cultivate his power before going after the Medusa. For months pass while he cultivates in a cave, generating an enormous orb of energy. Eventually, the energy becomes uncontrollable and explodes in the sky, destroying the cave. Excited, Tian realizes he's entering the realm of elite martial artists, preparing to start hunting. Walking through the strong rain, the protagonist arrives at an improvised cemetery with 11 graves, courtesy of Ling. Although the warriors who ventured into the depths likely left no trace, she at least left some graves in their honor, showing her good nature. Tian appreciates the gesture. As he observes the place, he finds the umbrella the old man had used under the water. Taking it and opening it, he is surprised that it still works, as all the raindrops are repelled before touching it. Now, it seems like an impermeable barrier that surrounds him in a giant drop of water, allowing him to fly. He immediately jumps into the water and speeds up, activating his shadow ability to become invisible. However, he stops abruptly when he finds himself in absolute nothingness, with a status window indicating the presence of a giant beast called Tiger Octavus, an intermediate-level monster that passes right in front of him. Terrified of being discovered, he decides to continue deeper into the water, hoping to find the immortal Medusa. Unbeknownst to him, a gigantic tentacle is quickly approaching, and barely avoiding it, he realizes the tentacle belongs to the Medusa, a colossal beast with advanced recovery talent. It moves at incredible speed, releasing its weapon to try to hurt the creature, causing it to scream in pain. However, it regenerates within seconds. Astonished, Tian waits for the next strike, blocking it with his hand while copying the Medusa's regeneration talent as expected. He is thrown far, crashing against a rock. He barely manages to get up, laughing because he obtained what he wanted, the regeneration talent. But there's no time to celebrate, as a giant ink cloud approaches him. He blocks it with the umbrella but loses it in the process, leaving him without protection in the deep water. Realizing he won't last much longer and seeing not one, but a swarm of giant Medusas ahead, he decides to do the most logical thing: run. He manages to reach the surface with the tentacles chasing him, jumping out of the water and using his speed to fly toward the shore. Running as fast as he can, he finally collapses, thinking he escaped. He uses this moment to copy the talent, fusing with it during the process. Though the initial pain knocks him to the ground, he begins to get used to it, absorbing the ability quickly and wanting to test it immediately. He does so with the Medusa venom that was injected into his hand during the fight. Using the regeneration talent, his body heals completely, and Tian moves at full speed, amazed that the talent has no side effects. However, he sees it as a problem that all his talents so far are support type. He concludes he must seek offensive talents to face stronger enemies. He decides to return home, reading a treasure book and considering whether to face a gigantic bear or a phoenix, but not being convinced by either. Meanwhile, his sister cuts his hair, complaining about being left alone for so long. He apologizes but is really focused on reading about a divine-powered ant with strength talent, which could complicate martial artists in groups. This marks his next prey. Determined, he heads to the martial pavilion, where the blonde girl greets him enthusiastically upon recognizing him, as it's been a while since they last saw each other. The protagonist tells her he's there for magical ants and the items on that list. She treats him like a child for wanting to eat things like that, but she confirms that they don't have them. However, she has some information about them, mentioning that the Lenai base is preparing a mid-sized commercial channel where there are many beasts, including magical ants. The place she refers to is the Iron Fang base, located 100 kilometers from Lenai. The protagonist realizes that the Iron Fang base is planning to invade that location, and she confirms it, handing him a card. This card is a ticket to participate in the event, and if he joins, he could obtain the magical ants. The moment to go hunting arrives, planning to eventually confront the Mo family. Meanwhile, at the Lenai base, a man is giving a speech about the coalition with a mid-scale base, seeking to increase the resources they don't have to grow their power. Several warriors listen attentively as he assures them that although the operation will be dangerous, the benefits they will gain will surpass those of any hunting expedition. This excites everyone, who praises the Lin family. Among the crowd, Tian watches, recognizing the man as the leader of the base he belongs to. The group of Gal Wolf, who is also there cheering, makes Tian wonder if the leader still remembers him. Meanwhile, the leader continues his speech, promising that all the items found in the mission will be shared among them. This sparks even more excitement, especially when they are promised additional rewards, such as 20 mid-grade Fierce Beast pills and 2 million cards. Finally, he asks them to sign up and wishes them good luck amid the cheers. A woman requests them to form a line for a test, which consists of touching a rock that will determine their martial arts ability. A large number of people, including Tian, stand in line. Tian feels annoyed about having to work with these wealthy families, especially the Mo family, and worries that if they detect him as an elite martial artist, he will have problems. He decides that reducing his strength when touching the rock should suffice to lower his rank by a couple of levels. When his turn comes, he concentrates on not unleashing all his power, trying to make sure his rank drops. Meanwhile, he observes how the rock displays his martial arts rank as advanced. This catches the attention of the academy director, though others are simply surprised that someone so young has such a high rank. Most assume he must be some genius from a wealthy family thanks to his advanced cultivation. Tian withdraws, realizing that even showing a small fraction of his power had drawn too much attention. He's observed by Gay, who admires him for having such a high rank at such a young age, as his group is stuck at intermediate warriors, with the exception of him, who is advanced. Still, the whole group admires the boy, and one of them suggests that Gay should include him as a new younger brother. Gay, however, doubts that someone so strong would want to join them. To everyone's surprise, Tian walks over to them, revealing his face with a big smile, excited to meet Gay again. Gay immediately recognizes him as the boy who rescued the girl from the silver wolf, amazed that Tian reached such a high rank in just a year. Tian, trying to be humble, comments that he's just been lucky and takes the opportunity to ask to join their group. Gay excitedly agrees right away. The atmosphere among the group is very lively, and the archer looks at Tian with flirtatious eyes, saying that with the last member, everything would be easier. This makes the protagonist nervous. Later, they reach the hunting zone, where Gay leads them, commenting on the rumors that only low-ranked beasts are there, but warns them not to let their guard down. Wolves charge toward them at full speed, which Tian notices immediately and alerts the group. Gay asks them to stay calm when surrounded by wolves, considering it a mere warm-up, claiming half of the wolves for himself and leaving the rest to Tian while the others provide support. The protagonist, confident, says he will handle it. With the team ready, they prepare to face the ferocious beasts. Gay orders them to attack, and both warriors take opposite directions. The beasts rush toward Tian, who eliminates one and then runs to finish off another wolf with a kick, leaving it on the ground. As the wolf tries to recover, Tian stabs it again, finishing it off. Gay congratulates him, claiming the final victory for himself by eliminating one more, which makes the protagonist laugh, as he's only holding back. The archer, more interested in Tian, watches him with admiration. Meanwhile, a bald member of the group comments that they shouldn't go easy on him just because he's a talented rookie, which irritates Gay, who is trying to appear more heroic. One of the group members examines the fallen wolves, questioning why they attacked before entering the valley since they were out of their territory. Gay guesses that perhaps the wolves didn't have another choice, thinking they were fleeing from stronger monsters. This makes one of the members nervous, but the bald one calms him down, reminding them they have advanced and intermediate warriors to handle the situation. Gay then shows the radio the Lin family gave him as the team leader, assuring them they can ask for help if needed. And so, the group was led forward. They reached the depths of the area where Gay ordered them to stop before an unexpected enemy. Prod Alert was the first to notice, seeing a giant lizard that spat fire. It launched a fireball that blocked the warrior's path and, for some reason, surprised Tian, who assumed he hadn't read the monster's name. Now the group faces the monster up close. The intermediate-level warriors volunteer to fight and rush in full force. Tian worries about them, but he trusts they can handle a simple low-level monster. Later, the beast is defeated, and all the exhausted guys are congratulated by the captain. However, the archer doesn't consider herself very helpful. The short-haired guy tells her that her distractions were very useful, and then the long-haired guy becomes confident, saying he could handle 2 or 3 more beasts. However, his overconfidence made him not notice a giant fireball approaching from behind, but Tian rescues him at full speed, dragging him away from the impact point. Everyone is astonished as they see another monster of the same type approaching. Realizing the fight isn't over, they watch as 3 huge monsters approach through the flames. Gale, desperate, requests help from the nearby teams via radio, but he is immediately ignored. His teammates tell him not to expect help, as they doubt that the Lin family really matters to him. The captain, furious, regrets following a bunch of bastards who have abandoned him like everyone else. He destroys his radio and draws his sword, deciding to go forward and ordering his teammates to escape. This enrages the short-haired guy, who asserts that they are all brothers, so if they leave, they will all leave together. The captain insists it's an order, but neither the archer nor the short-haired guy wants to obey. On the other hand, the long-haired guy doesn't think twice and runs at full speed, hoping the end won't catch him and that someone else will follow. This makes the short-haired guy promise that if he survives, he'll deal with the coward Gay. He then speaks to Tian, the youngest, asking him to take his teammates and protect them while escaping. The short-haired guy claims that since Tian is the new guy, he can leave them behind, just like the archer who doesn't want him to ruin his bright future. This only draws an ironic smile from Tian, who claims he is ready to go, but forward, running toward the creatures. Unleashing his true power, Igel recognizes that the boy has been holding back all this time. That aura was that of an elite warrior, leaving everyone in shock. Tian moves forward, about to receive a massive fireball, which he cuts through with ease. Although he hadn't planned on revealing his power, he knows well that if he doesn't, Gale's group will be wiped out. He launches himself into battle against the lizards, swiftly cutting off one's head. Tian reflects that his plan was to use Gale's strength to avoid intervening, but seeing that in an escape situation, the one with the highest chance of surviving was the captain, who instead of trying to escape, decided to stay and fight while his teammates fled. Seeing such a heroic act, Tian admits that if he didn't attack, he couldn't consider his hand. While dodging enemy attacks, he reflects on what makes him different from the despicable Mo family. Jumping to avoid a series of blows in the air, he thought about the possible consequences of his actions. Though he trusts Gale won't cause him problems, he skillfully dodges attacks that destroy the terrain around him, exciting his teammates. Tian uses his invisibility ability to reappear behind the lizards, and with great speed, activates his Dark Shadows technique, causing hundreds of cuts on the monsters, who screamed in pain before disintegrating into pieces. Gale clenches his fist upon seeing that the plot now undeniably belongs to the elite power of the Lin family. Meanwhile, the long-haired guy requests help as he is attacked by wolves. The captain, with no interest in helping them, stands firm while Tian asks his teammates if they want to go deeper or return. Tian tells them he will continue forward and asks if they want to accompany him. The captain, with determination, states that his team entered together and will leave together, which greatly pleases the protagonist. Later, the archer heals the short-haired guy's wound, who thanks Tian for taking him so far. From atop a building, Tian jumps to tell them that they will continue advancing, making it clear that they can go home if they wish. Although no one wants to leave, the captain knows that with his combat skills, he can take care of himself. He asks Tian to reconsider, but the boy is determined to continue, so the others ask their captain if they can also join him. He accepts reality, admitting that under the circumstances, they would only be a hindrance, allowing Tian to continue alone. And so, Tian kept advancing through the ruins, thinking that before facing powerful families, he should test the limits of his regeneration power. While crossing places filled with flames, a foul smell marked the arrival at his destination, where the ground immediately began to shake, forcing him to jump just as a gigantic hand from a creature emerged from the depths. Without hesitation, the creature threw a brutal punch that struck Tian's face, sending him flying, but Tian quickly returned, charging with all his strength to fight against a giant hand that seemed to struggle to emerge from the ground, waving its arm to push the protagonist back. And finally, the Colossus emerged from the ground, jumping in front of Tian, who was excited to see his enormous rival. He asked the monster to help him test his regeneration power. With the beast growling in front of him, Tian began to gather a massive amount of fire, which he expelled directly at the protagonist, throwing him straight into a huge explosion that resounded from a distance. His companions watched, worried. Tian, on the other hand, emerged happily from the rubble, satisfied to witness the power of the Lizard King. Walking forward, he proposed a game, just as he was about to fall victim to the fire breath of the monster, which made him fall to his knees. Getting up, he decided to test what would happen first, if the Lizard King could burn him to ashes or if he would exhaust him to the point of collapse. Breathing deeply, Tian prepared to leap directly towards the monster's head. The monster watched him come while recharging its fire breath, which it used to throw Tian again into the buildings, causing another massive explosion. Over time, Tian's companions continued watching the battle from afar, doubting whether the young man was still alive. Gale didn't know either, but he was sure that in this battle, they wouldn't have been of any help, barely resisting the shockwaves from the explosions. As for Tian, he was somewhat tired, sitting on the lifeless body of the Lizard King, proclaiming himself the winner of the game. He admitted that regeneration is an ability that consumes a lot of energy and decided to use the mid-tier beast he had slain to recover his energy, quickly observing its blood as if it were a refreshing drink. Meanwhile, Gale and his team saw that the battle had ended and waited to find out what had happened to their little brother, who, to everyone's surprise, was emerging from the ruins safe and sound. He was surprised to see them still there, even though he had told them to leave. His captain, smiling, admitted that even though they weren't useful, they were still worried about him, offering him a shirt to stop showing off his gains, which he gladly accepted. Now, Tian was unsure about what to do with all the spoils, including the Lizard King. Gale knew he was the one who deserved the credit, but Tian decided to give them to his teammates as a thank you for not leaving him alone. His companions, amazed at seeing the giant monster, knew that disassembling it would be more tiring than dealing with the beast itself. With this, Tian asked them to take care of it while he returned, leaving the captain confused about why Tian wouldn't take part in the spoils. However, Tian had other plans, walking towards the territory of the divine ants, leaving Gale confused. Thus, Tian moved quickly through the streets, remembering how, before leaving, the chief had told him that the hardest part of the beast elimination mission would be facing the divine ants. He recalled how they had warned him that even though an ant might be a lesser beast, an entire colony of them was something no martial artist could survive. And so, Tian finally landed at the top of a mountain, remembering how his friends were hoping for his safe return. In front of him, the largest group of the army was gathered there, liberated by the family Luamo, the Lin family, and an elderly man he did not know, King, a martial artist from the Steel Fong base, who quickly detected Tian's presence and furiously sent his men to capture him. Tian, calm, waited to be taken, as he planned to join the group anyway. The guards took him to King, who immediately recognized him as an elite martial artist, asking why he was watching him in secret. Tian answered that he simply wanted to join the mission. Intrigued, King ordered his men to release him, but not before wanting to know which family he belonged to. When Tian did not answer, he was rejected by all the families present, which confused King even more as he saw that the young man was of elite level but had no family or backing. He started to have suspicions, but luckily these dissipated when King, the leader of the Lin family, claimed that Tian was with them. So the protagonist had no choice but to accept, being sent with the rest of the team while Min proudly believed he had obtained an elite warrior for free. From a distance, he saw how Min wanted to recruit the boy, but Lin knew well that the protagonist already belonged to the martial pavilion, including with the troops. Tian walked among the troops led by the heads of the families. The protagonist saw that everyone now knew his true level, making it more complicated to move secretly. However, with his strength, he feared nothing. At that moment, King halted the troops to activate a light orb in front of him, asking an old man to draw a magic circle, which they called a formation. Realizing that they were facing the nest of the divine ants, Tian saw his target. With the formation finished, King ordered everyone to stay back while he joined his hands to activate a magic circle over the ant nests, breaking the spell and unleashing a rain of fire that destroyed the nests. This spectacle amazed both Min and Tian, who began thinking about learning to perform such techniques. From above, Sia watched horrified as King had used such an expensive formation without thinking too much. However, Ling knew that the plans of the White Fang were clear: intimidate the entire Linai base with this. The troops moved inside the ruins, amazed that all the nests had been destroyed by that powerful technique, and everyone moved forward, calm and happy, thinking that everything was over, except Tian, who was upset to see that there was no ant left from which to copy its talent. Meanwhile, Ling, smiling, admitted that the formation had been powerful, but King had only disturbed one hive. Meanwhile, a group of warriors discovered a giant hole from which a monstrous ant emerged, stabbing a terrified soldier before roaring. Everyone was scared except for Tian, who smiled happily, seeing that it was not just one, but many more. King prepared his men for battle while Ming did the same with the Linai base soldier. They all rushed to attack, including Tian, who moved toward his first target. Although some soldiers had already defeated the ant, Tian arrived in time to take the corpse. He had copied his talent and now only needed to fuse it. However, he was surrounded by ants and needed a safe place to do it. Activating his speed talent, he ran until he was stopped by two ants blocking his path, which he had to cut down using his shadow technique. At that moment, the entire battlefield was illuminated by a red light coming from a penetrating gaze through the shadows that made all the warriors feel an overwhelming pressure on their bodies. It was King, who immediately noticed, terrified, the presence of an advanced grade beast. The creature caused the earth to tremble, emerging and revealing itself as a giant yellow ant, watching the warriors from above. Its leader was the first to order a retreat, escaping at full speed, followed by the elders. Meanwhile, a member of the Lin family observed how the rich family ran excessively fast. His men asked if they should also retreat, but they had no choice but to run as fast as they could. This amused Lin, who saw them as fools, deciding to leave as well, although she was concerned about Tian. However, her leader trusted that he could handle it on his own. In the middle of the retreating soldiers, Tian wondered why so many great martial artists were escaping instead of fighting. One of them shouted that the ant had advanced grade strength, and combined with the others, they could easily defeat the Grandmaster. This was something Tian knew well. The first to escape and still leading the retreat was the Master of the White Horn. Tian reflected on how unreliable these so-called celebrities were. Meanwhile, the creature reached the slower warriors, devouring them and roaring loudly, releasing a sound wave that froze the warriors, exerting such pressure on their bodies that the air became so thick some fell to their knees, unable to breathe. Everyone was struggling to escape, except for Tian, who continued to move quickly, trying to get out of the range of the black smoke that covered them. He pushed forward to exit the area of the creature, taking advantage of the ants focusing on the large team, thinking it was the perfect moment to escape. He then retraced his steps and found the bones of the Lizard King. Observing that Gale's team was very professional, having left only the bones behind, Tian climbed to the top of the buildings, where he saw the sunrise, preparing for the fusion. He immediately accepted it, feeling the effects in his body, resisting fiercely. He understood that, after seeing so many great individuals, only absolute power could face them. That night, he ripped off the remains of his shirt, thinking about returning home, surrounded by all his power. Although now at home, he kept meditating, noticing that thanks to his new talent, his strength had increased tenfold. He believed eliminating rookie artists would be easy, unaware of his annoyed sister, who, after being left alone for so long, complained that he only sat there doing nothing. Frustrated that he didn't pay attention, she threw a final warning before returning to the kitchen to prepare her revenge. Later, Ye called her brother, informing him that dinner was ready, a large amount prepared to reward him for his hard work. Tian, smiling but not fully believing it, accepted the meal. However, just as he was about to eat, someone knocked at the door. He saw this as an opportunity to escape momentarily. Opening the door, he found Gale, who was quickly let in. Gale greeted him cheerfully and said he was there to give him his share of the loot. Although Tian tried to refuse, the giant insisted, forcing him to accept. Taking advantage of the situation, Tian invited Gale to eat, which left his sister worried. During the meal, Gale continued to eat voraciously, much to Yeyu's surprise, who was stunned to hear that her food was too good, even though she had tried everything to make it unappetizing. Later, while Gale kept eating, Tian asked him about the events of the days he had spent meditating, especially regarding the fierce beasts cleanup operation. Gale explained that the two bases involved suffered great losses, including 50 martial artists and 3 masters, after 2 failed attempts to enter the territory. This intrigued Tian, until he learned that they only managed to defeat the ants after sending a grandmaster from the Steel Fang. To Tian's surprise, the mission was still active, making him wonder if all the sacrifices had been worth it, and he began to suspect the true intentions of the Steel Fang base. Later, Tian dismissed the captain, who assured him they would meet again. However, just as Gale was leaving, an envoy from the Mo family intercepted him, bringing a dinner invitation from the head of the family. Tian didn't hesitate and rejected the invitation, which angered the envoy. The envoy unleashed his power, claiming that no one rejected the Mo family. The head tried to calm the situation with words, but the envoy was not interested, walking directly towards Tian and placing a hand on his shoulder, while whispering that it was in his best interest to accept the invitation. Seeing the hand on his shoulder, Tian became furious, grabbing the envoy and slamming him violently to the ground. Gale tried to calm him down and let the envoy escape, nearly in tears. The captain suggested that Tian not provoke those bastards, but Tian, with experience, saw this as an opportunity to test his strength talent, which allowed him to break arms easily without exerting much effort. Meanwhile, the envoy was furious, promising that Tian would pay for this. Later that night, at the Mo family's mansion, a man with a mustache and spiked hair, along with the family head, were in a large room. At that moment, a servant arrived in a hurry. The mustached man, Kang Chun, the eldest son of the Mo ancestor, an elite martial artist, and heir to the clan, scolded the servant for not completing the mission correctly. The servant explained that he had extended the invitation with respect, but when the young man mentioned the Mo family, he dismissed them and broke the invitation. This enraged Kang, who released so much energy that he moved all the furniture in the room, including the envoy, before waiting for orders from his father, who appeared to be in poor health. He then gave the servant the order to leave, and Kang attended to his father, bringing him medicine. The old man remembered how, during the battle with the sacred ants, he had to use a secret technique to escape. He was so badly injured that it seems he doesn't have much time left to live. His son tries to console him, assuring him that he will recover, but the old man knows well that his time is limited. His greatest concern is that once he's gone, his family will lose its great teacher. That's why they need Tian Kong. He thinks the protagonist might be hoping to be recruited by the Lin family, something he cannot allow. The old man decides that if the boy doesn't want to cooperate willingly, he will make him cooperate through force, using a poison that eliminates the wisdom of the spirit from the body, leaving Kay stunned. The plan is to remove Tian's spirit, brainwash him, and give him a false identity, making him believe he is the illegitimate son of the Mo ancestor, so he can be accepted into the clan. This worries Kay, but the old man clarifies that he does not plan to take his place as heir. The intention is only to have someone powerful to carry the Mo surname. Although Kay is only concerned about his reputation being tarnished, the old man isn't interested and orders him to follow instructions. Kay agrees, promising to send the veterans to capture the boy. Thus, a group of hooded figures crosses the rooftops of the city, arriving at Tian's house. One of them enters, reporting to the mercenary in charge, who orders to go after Ye to intimidate the protagonist. They start looking for him, while the other mercenaries outside position themselves to cover all exits and escape routes. The mercenary reaches the girl's room, where she appears to be asleep in her bed with the sheets covering her head, ready to capture her. He pulls the sheets, which suddenly fly toward him, enveloping him. He uses his sword to free himself, only to fall into Tian's brutal grip, who lifts him up, smiling while complaining about how long it took them to arrive. The mercenaries wait for news from their comrade, whom they are literally strangling, to the point that his earpiece falls off from the pressure, until the mercenary is killed and dropped to the ground. The others hear the desperate screams of their comrade from the window and are informed by Tian, who throws the body from the rooftop, landing on the ground, obviously lifeless. This puts everyone on high alert, thinking the protagonist called reinforcements, something that amuses Tian because he knows no one in the base would support an attack against the Mo family. All the veterans gather in a building, where one of them begins to feel a presence, but sees nothing, assuming it's just his imagination. Right then, his head falls to the ground as Tian arrives, claiming his second victim. The veterans are terrified, thinking the boy is allied with a shadow assassin. They begin their attack, but Tian eliminates them with monstrous speed that leaves them unable to react. He then targets the next victims, chasing them down and defeating one, while the other tries to surprise him from above, but is dodged and knocked down by Tian's brutal attack. He watches as his opponents attempt to flee, so he hunts them down using his shadow assassin technique, killing them all. Now, their leader desperately screams as the protagonist continues exterminating them until a new team arrives. Tian faces them in a clean punch that creates a brutal clash between the two warriors, sending the opponent flying purely with physical power. Only the bald veteran remains, unable to believe that he is facing a mere martial artist. This veteran is a well-known figure to the protagonist, whom he recognizes as Mo's father. He uses the fact that they know each other to try to make a deal, but Tian makes it clear that it was he who severed the head of his son. The now very kind old man seems calm, blaming his deceased son for getting into trouble and offering Tian a lot of money to spare his life. However, the protagonist isn't interested in that and, with all his strength, takes the old man's head and slams it brutally to the ground, finishing him off. Tian decides to start planning his revenge, angry that they keep trying to hurt his family. He takes the bald man's cape and uses it, flying off at high speed. Meanwhile, in the Mo mansion, the old man is worried since the veterans have not returned. His son tries to calm him, reminding him that they had sent the 10 best veterans, who were unbeatable in the base. Just then, a sword cuts through the air at high speed, heading toward the old man, who barely manages to dodge it. The sword causes chaos on the ground, enraging the old man, who asks who is responsible. Tian introduces himself, mocking the fact that they tried to kill him and are now surprised that he is there to return the favor. Ken is shocked to see him and asks about the veterans, to which Tian consoles him by telling him that he will soon see them all in hell. Ken doesn't have time to process what he heard when he is literally split in half and falls to the ground, lifeless. His old father, crying in pain, takes his body in his arms and unleashes his power in a furious outburst. Tian immediately recognizes the power as the secret arts he saw while escaping from the ants. The old man went mad with fury over losing his son. He decided to eliminate the protagonist by transforming into a muscular abomination with an excess of steroids, attacking the protagonist who couldn't react to the huge punch heading straight for his face, only to receive another brutal blow that sent him flying, barely managing to stay on his feet as he saw an enraged old man walking toward him with a murderous look, affirming that nothing would calm his hatred until he saw him eliminated. To make matters worse, the guards finally arrived, but this only amused Tian as he noticed it took them quite a while from the moment he eliminated their leader to the moment they reacted, mocking the poor security measures of the Mo family. The old man ordered them to annihilate him, and the troops advanced while Tian confidently waited, jumping onto them with his shadow technique. He wiped out his targets again, even the old man who returned to the fight still surprised by Tian's level, despite being just an elite martial artist. The old man, also confident, attacked, believing that the secret arts he possessed wouldn't last much longer, calling Tian arrogant. He didn't plan to give up and materialized a giant sword, starting a brutal clash of weapons, unleashing power all around them. Nearby, some hooded figures were watching intently. One was surprised by the level of the great martial artist, while another, calling him the old man, wanted to intervene. However, his young master preferred to observe how everything would unfold. The old man's face was revealed, showing that it was Min, and the fight continued, with both warriors attacking with everything they had. The old man began to retreat, amazed by the protagonist's speed, falling victim to it when he received an attack that almost cut him in half. The old man stayed on his feet and attacked again, furiously smashing the floor with a blow that didn't land. He couldn't believe he missed again, yet Tian remained standing and full of energy, ready to continue the fight. This was enough for the old man to realize that he wouldn't win if he kept wasting his energy like this, so he changed his plan and sought to ask the Lin family for help while he still had some strength. Tian tried to provoke him into continuing the fight, and the old man responded by materializing a smoke grenade, starting his escape at full speed. Tian used his speed ability to catch up, which annoyed the old man, who increased his pace only to be caught again. He realized that he couldn't escape someone with such high-level speed talent, so he tried to confuse Tian with fast spins, but Tian enjoyed it and decided to play along, secretly catching up and draining the old man's energy, leaving him on the ground, barely able to stand and in pain, with no choice but to give up. He admitted that the end of the Mo family was near. Tian decided to advance toward him to send him straight to hell. In desperation, the old man used his last resort, begging and offering money pathetically, which seemed to be a pattern for this family. Tian, hearing the offer, appeared to accept it, and the old man smiled maliciously as he materialized his greatest treasure, an orb that pulsed with hundreds of knives spinning in all directions. Tian managed to dodge most of them, furious and with a wound on his face, seeing how pathetic the old man's dirty tricks were. The old man, rising victoriously, mocked Tian, claiming the knives were poisoned and would surely eliminate him. However, Tian activated his healing talent, leaving the old man dumbfounded, unable to understand how someone could possess so many talents. Tian then took one of the knives, telling the old man that he didn't even know how he achieved it. Tian then told him to ask the afterlife about it. Meanwhile, from the rooftop, Gale was watching Tian's sister, complaining that she felt like a babysitter, muttering just as Tian appeared, surprising Gale. Gale asked him awkwardly if he had finished what he needed to do, and Tian nodded, confirming he had wiped out the Mo family for good. This made Gale tremble slightly as he noticed Tian was serious. Tian then asked about his sister, who, according to Gale, was asleep after taking a sedative. This calmed Tian, and Gale asked if they could go down to keep talking, leading them to a dark alley, where Gale immediately asked about Tian's next plans to deal with the Mo family. Tian replied that he wanted Gale to cultivate, leaving Gale confused. The reason was that Tian intended to find a way for Gale to improve his skills. However, Gale knew this would only be possible with enough money to buy the necessary resources. As they spoke, they entered the house where Gale pointed out where his sister was sleeping. Tian found her deeply asleep and approached her, waking her up. Though drowsy, she recognized him immediately and jumped to hug him, worried she wouldn't see him again. He simply comforted her, promising that they would always be together, though she felt like he was lying. Tian shed a tear and reinforced that promise. The next day, a crowd gathered to witness the brutal annihilation of the Mo family. Among the crowd was a random man who announced the arrival of the Lin family leader, Ming, accompanied by the great martial warrior, Lince. Gale warned his mistress, who observed closely as Ming arrived, feigning surprise and sorrow over the end of one of the patriarchs of the base, who lay on the ground, covered only by a towel. However, his interest quickly shifted to the orb the old man had used, lifting it up, recognizing it as the Mo family's secret weapon and treasure, the Iron Lynx Pearl. He also recognized it as a sinister weapon with long-range capabilities, ideal for desperate situations. This enraged Min, who almost destroyed the sphere, seeing that even with such an artifact, the assassin had not only killed the Mo Elder but had done so with one of the blades from the orb. The few surviving individuals had identified the protagonist, thinking they were facing a warrior who surpassed even the great master. And the worst of all was that this warrior didn't seem like he belonged to the Lince base, and continuing like this, both were walking over the corpses where Lince theorizes that perhaps the Iron Fang base planned this to demonstrate its power. Ming backs this up, remembering that when the base offered them a trade route, they decided to send a spy who gave them information that close to the Iron Fang base, there was a high-level monster about to evolve, a threat so big it could exterminate the entire Lince base. Lince then assumed that the trade route would rather be an emigration route, which Ming confirmed. Both agreed that the two factions would likely end up merging, leading to the existence of two sides. Ming, seeing that soon he wouldn't be the Li family anymore, began thinking about what to do. Right at that moment, he had an idea which he assumed his assistant, Lince, had also thought of. They would distribute all the resources left by the Mo family among the remaining powerful families. Meanwhile, at Tian's house, he took out a bag full of elixirs, setting it aside for Gale, who thought what he saw on the ground was equivalent to the value of his own home. Yeyu was also surprised to see that, though she was furious because Tian hadn't spent the money she wanted him to use to find a good wife on elixirs. She doubted they were authentic. However, Tian assured her that not only were they real but of high quality. Suddenly, he handed her one for her to try, and Yeyu, surprised, had no choice but to drink it. Instantly, the elixir took effect, filling her with energy. Tian, with a triumphant smile, watched his creation. As time passed, it seemed that Yeyu would leave the house again with her sister, saddened to be left alone again. However, this time she would leave Gale to take care of her since he needed to keep strengthening himself. Now that the Lince base was increasingly threatened by more monsters, needing reinforcements from the Iron Fang and its two great masters, who would soon no longer hold up, leaving him no other choice but to keep getting stronger. Still, his sister shyly insisted that he stay, but he confidently reassured her that everything would be fine. He also hoped that she would learn the captain's physical combat techniques, and that both would cultivate their powers with elixirs. She accepted, affirming that she would wait for him at home. Tian smiled and promised to return, instructing Gale to take care of his sister. Gale, encouraged, also considered Tian's sister as his little sister. The conversation was interrupted by a motorcycle speeding through the city, followed by a black car with the Iron Fang base logo. Gale and Tian, surprised, watched the Iron Fang convoy, while Yeyu, uninterested, observed the noisy caravan, with an incredibly loud motorcyclist leading it, Zun Fun. His high statistics caught Tian's attention. With all the cars speeding by, raising smoke and dust, Yeyu was annoyed, feeling they were being a bit excessive. The protagonist, worried about his sister, thought the arrival of these individuals would bring no good. Decided, he sent his siblings inside while he sped off to the ironically named Thousand Leaf Forest. He immediately noticed that it was a very dry place where he found a giant footprint, which he identified as a Black Panther wolf. He planned to use it to improve his speed talent. When something seemed to disturb the forest, the protagonist became alert, sensing that there might be a monster nearby, moving at full speed to find it, until he encountered a giant monkey fighting with huge, fast cats, which he recognized as golden dragon panthers, conveniently stronger than the panthers he had been searching for. Watching them move at a speed that could reach apex level, he also knew that the gorilla probably had a monster level superior to even the lizard king he had defeated, doubting the panthers could win easily. So, he tried to find an alternative to copy the talent. In the middle of the battle, he suddenly felt a rough tongue on his leg. He looked down and saw a small yellow kitten looking up at him cheerfully. Terrified, he pulled back, but the kitten used a psychic technique to talk to him through the spirit light, offering to form a master-servant contract and promising to be his most loyal servant. Tian was shocked, especially by the kitten's feminine voice, and couldn't believe he was talking to such an adorable creature calling him master. Confused, he asked why it wanted him to be its master. The kitten responded that it had sensed a benevolent speed talent in him. Tian, analyzing the kitten's stats, discovered that in addition to its apex level speed, it had innate talents for medium-level endurance and apprentice-level healing. Realizing he was facing a divine beast, he understood the kitten's value. It then asked for help to save its parents, who were facing the gorilla, while its mother was pregnant. Tian, smiling, accepted the request and named the kitten Little Jean. Little Jean enjoyed being petted by his new master, and Tian also enjoyed copying his power, which he immediately fused. Thus, Tian climbed up the rock, observing the creature while considering the high expectations little Jean had placed on him. He began his attack, releasing his weapons, with the adorable, diminutive Jean jumping in an intimidating manner on his shoulder, stomping forcefully to launch himself directly toward the monster's weak points, severely injuring its eyes and blinding it with another move, leaving it screaming in pain. However, now he had another problem. The huge kittens were heading towards him, so he hastened Jean to meow to his mother in feline language, explaining that he was not their enemy. After a deep conversation of meows, the Golden Panther mother was convinced to trust him, accepting the recovery pill to protect the baby in her womb. Now fully recovered, the Golden Panther father took the opportunity to tell his son to ask for an alpra, which he accepted reluctantly, but it filled little Jean with joy. At that moment, the huge gorilla started running at full speed to escape, which angered Tian when he saw it flee. The Golden Panthers also had no intention of letting it go. Joining them, they decided to chase it, confident that their 3 advanced speeds would be enough against a giant monkey, with Jean reminding them that he was also participating in the fight, launching himself into the attack, overtaking the gorilla. Although the protagonist was having trouble controlling the skill, the monkey was about to attack him. Seeing the blow coming, he activated his speed to face it head-on, and with his strength talent, he struck a blow to the gorilla while the panthers attacked it with bites. Tian, at full speed, prepared for the final blow that resounded throughout the forest. The kittens chased after him. However, the gorilla returned, surprising everyone, including the protagonist, but not the kitten on his shoulder, who was preparing to jump. At full speed, like a lightning bolt, he pierced the gorilla's face, sending it flying. With the gorilla destroyed, the kitten returned tenderly to his master's arms, who joyfully gave him affection, relieved to have fought alongside such a fierce beast rather than against it, leaving everything calm. But suddenly, the female panther fell to the ground, looking injured. The kitten ran to his mother, and Tian walked calmly, thinking that maybe the panther had suffered internal damage in the fight. Luckily, she always carries healing potions, so the giant kitten healed her, ending the scare, but a new one began immediately with the arrival of terrifying beasts, which, according to little Jean, had taken down the gorilla. He recognized them as wolves, heading toward them in a large pack. Tian assumed they wanted to eliminate their new kitten friends to claim the forest as their own, so he unleashed all his power, jumped, and landed directly on the leader of the pack, terrifying the rest. He took advantage of this to throw out a fun reference, lifting Jean and proclaiming him as their new king. Later, the panthers continued walking through the mountains, although Tian was concerned because the female was moving a lot after the injuries. She, in the language of the injured, told him she wanted to give him a gift for his help. They entered the depths of the forest, heading toward a cave where the gift was. Inside, they found a kind of spiritual herb, this being the gift. The only downside was that they would have to wait 30 days for the fruit to bloom, needing to stay there for 30 days. The kitten and the protagonist watched the flower closely, wondering what its effects would be. After some time, Tian had to attend a feline birth, although it really seemed like just yelling instructions and giving moral support without actually doing much until he saw excitedly how a new mini kitten shot out, starting the celebration in the cave. And so, a month passed quickly with the protagonist observing the spiritual flower, which seemed to have changed color and was emitting a strong smell, making him think it had finally matured. He took it to eat, and at the insistence of little Jean, as soon as he ate it, he felt the effects of a heart attack and collapsed to the ground, stiff as a board, making the little kitten think he had sent him to the other world. However, later Tian woke up, feeling that he had gained a new spiritual mental ability, an ability that only strong martial artists manage to achieve. Not only that, but it also affected his copying ability, increasing his search range and even allowing him to copy abilities from a distance, detecting the closest one to him, almost copying by accident a resistance talent, which wouldn't be useful for him, preferring to cultivate it first. He decided to go back home with this great gain, so he said goodbye to the panthers, except for Jean, who cried and ran toward him, asking him not to leave. He jumped on him, making him accept and planning to introduce him to someone who would adore him at home, making the kitten cry with happiness. And so, they returned to the real world, running through ruins with Jean having fun, never having seen the outside world, seeing it as something interesting. Meanwhile, for Tian, it would only be dangerous, a thought confirmed when he noticed he was walking on the remains of what once was the 5th Academy, with the bodies of students scattered along the path, including that of his old friend Sang. Sang ran toward him, asking what had happened, making him react slightly. Recognizing him, the protagonist, happy that he's alive, took out a high-grade monster blood potion to give him. Sang, now conscious, explained that they had been attacked by members of the Iron Fang base, which seemed to have been completely destroyed by the monster. This caused hundreds of thousands of people to occupy the base, causing chaos and allowing warriors, thieves, and usurpers to do whatever they wanted. Tian asked who the current leader of the base was. Sang replied that the Ling family was still in charge, though only by name, something that matched Tian's predictions that the White Fang would take control. Meanwhile, Yellow, extremely protected, practiced swordplay with her wooden sword against Gali, trying to attack him, but he dodged every move and finally knocked her down, breaking her sword. The girl, frustrated, lamented the defeat. Her instructor, however, assured her that she had talent. She responded that she owed it to the teacher, removing her helmet and sitting on the ground. Suddenly, some applause caught her attention, making her turn around and find her brother. Her eyes sparkled with excitement as she rushed toward him, waking the kitten she was carrying, which immediately took it and ran off. Gali approached, joking that they had traded her for the kitten. Tian thanked the captain for helping his sister reach the rank of martial apprentice. The captain, happy to help, asked if Tian was aware of what had happened with the Iron Fang base. While walking through the street, Tian asked if something had happened at home. Gali assured him that they lived in a safe area, especially because after Tian left, Sia arrived at their house, leaving a red cross that would prevent anyone from the Iron Fang base from even thinking about hurting them. The cross was the insignia of the Martial Pavilion, something Tian appreciated, relieved. However, Tian wasn't entirely convinced that it would keep them completely safe, especially because Sun Feng, the motorcyclist, whose slow tactics Tian had analyzed before leaving the city, was looking for a death duel with him. Sun Feng was one of the 4 geniuses from the Iron Fang base and had traveled the entire city looking for elite warriors to defeat, managing to defeat everyone in combat. And through the streets, there was a motorcycle speeding, driven by the same Zun Feng, performing reckless maneuvers until it stopped in front of Dean. Queen looked at him seriously. Sun Feng smiled upon seeing him and warned that there would be a duel at 10 a.m. the next day, all in an intimidating tone, asking if Tian would have the courage to show up. Tian promised he would be there. Meanwhile, he activated his ability to copy and took Feng's intermediate cultivation talent. Satisfied, he sped off. Gale scolded Tian when he realized that with his current level, he wouldn't be able to defeat Feng. Tian, though a bit nervous, clenched his fist, not fully sure of the outcome. That night, he analyzed all his abilities, focusing especially on the cultivation talent he wanted to improve. Finally, he copied the power at the comfort of his house and prepared, going out to the balcony to observe the moon while waiting for the duel the next day. The next morning, in the Minghui Square, a crowd gathered around a monument. Feng was waiting, surrounded by people discussing the fight. Most were mocking, sure that Tian would be just another victim of Feng. Some commented that this time, Feng had asked to fight an unknown, which puzzled others. Some were worried that after defeating his opponent, Feng might go too far and destroy the monument, a habit of his where he used his victories to crush the pride of noble families, and now it was the turn of the Lin family. Among the crowd, Lin and Sia arrived, the latter concerned about the protagonist. However, her teacher knew well that even if he didn't win, Tian would likely be able to defend himself. Finally, the false twin sisters were in the same place. With Yeyu arriving at the square, not understanding why there were so many people, Gale explained that Feng's ego essentially demanded a crowd for his fights. Yeyu was worried she wouldn't be able to see anything, so she tried once again to convince her older brother not to fight. However, he only patted her head, promising it would be over quickly, then jumped to the center of the square like a lightning bolt, presenting himself with tremendous elegance, catching everyone's attention. Feng, surprised to see that the protagonist really had shown up, smiled confidently and presented his reward, the bronze-level wind-cut sword technique. However, Tian responded by materializing a bronze-level technique book of the same rank as Feng's offering, throwing the book disdainfully, knocking down the reward that Feng had presented in a gesture of contempt. This visibly angered Feng, who immediately attacked. From the crowd, Yui shouted for Tian to be careful, but Tian calmly waited for the attack and, seeing it coming at high speed, stepped aside effortlessly, astonishing his rival. Feng grew furious, seeing how the protagonist just avoided his cuts and attacked intensely until one cut a couple of hairs. However, Tian was about to respond, clenching his fist tightly to deliver a brutal punch that left Feng spitting blood and with several broken ribs, launching him into some crates. The protagonist mocked him. Feng, rising and seeing that Tian was strong, decided to go all out, preparing to launch multiple wind slashes. Tian dodged them by leaping back, but the attacks ended up cutting the monument, which angered Ming, who saw the monument of his family destroyed. As for Tian, he recognized that dodging the blows was harder than he had expected, but he was glad he could finally see the technique. This was all he was waiting for. Feng became even angrier after hearing this, but the protagonist clarified that he had never seen him as a worthy opponent, accepting the encounter only to see the wind cut technique, making his rival feel less appreciated. Feng charged again, only to be met with a powerful punch that shattered his sword. Tian then grabbed Feng's face and slammed it against the ground, destroying the floor and terrifying everyone. With his rival on the ground, the boy simply shook his hands, bored with the fight, and Feng was knocked out. Xia cheered excitedly, and Lin had strangely obsessive feelings. The protagonist claimed him as his, smiling sinisterly. Meanwhile, Tian was looking for the wind-cut book under the table when his sister interrupted him, congratulating him, making him feel overly proud. His sister asked him to teach her when they returned home, and the three left the place. Behind them, Lin was still shocked by the boy's victory, but Ming felt that his family had lost, seeing that things were about to get complicated and that the monument had also been destroyed. He sent his bodyguard to protect Tian's sister, assuming that the Zun clan would now go after her. Back at Captain Wolf's house, Tian was comfortably reading the wind-cut book, which increased the power of an attack sixfold, thinking that this was why Feng was so strong. He put the book aside and saw that there were still 30 days left before he could copy another power, wondering if he should search for Feng's talent. In the meantime, he would learn to use wind cut and improve his shadow cut, hoping to face a great master. As for Yeyu, she continued training intensely under Gale's instruction, who was worried because now that the fight was over, the Zun family would seek revenge, fearing for the girl's life. She had just noticed the penetrating gaze of the captain, who, saddened, called her over to place the Martial Pavilion cross pendant around her neck, telling her never to take it off. She saw it as a simple, pretty necklace, which she would care for like a talisman. At that moment, an archer was running through the streets desperately, calling for her captain. She arrived right where Gale was, asking if he had news about the Zun family. According to the girl, they were busy buying properties, so it seemed they weren't planning revenge just yet. All of this was overheard by an old garbage collector, who turned out to be Linz. A month later, the old man continued to pretend to be a garbage collector, but Tian, through his mental power, discovered him. Surprised that a boy like Tian had the mental abilities of a great master, Linz was taken aback. The protagonist, covering his face, was surprised that the Lin family had sent a great master to watch over him. He continued his way to the martial artist market, where Tian remembered that Gale had gotten him information about the Zun family. Apparently, to preserve the purity of their sword talent, they didn't hesitate to marry within families, regardless of the genetic issues this might cause. These problems were solved by executing anyone born with them. Tian recognized that it was a crazy family that ended up owning a large store, which was seemingly being inaugurated with big discounts promoted by Feng himself, who mingled with wealthy people who flattered him, feeding his ego. Tian, seeing him from a distance, thought of congratulating him too, but only so he wouldn't die before being useful to him. Later, Tian walked through a cemetery, placing flowers on his parents' grave, ready to say goodbye for the last time. He was planning to move to a safer base to keep his brother safe. As he said his final goodbye, he was about to tell them how he had grown when something moved at high speed toward him. The figure stopped just before reaching him. It was a person with an emo appearance, and with just his presence, he disrupted the protagonist, who attacked. His rival defended himself, admiring the strength of the furious boy, who claimed that he had been waiting for him for a long time. The attack continued, with the protagonist being blocked and about to receive a blow. Using his speed, he retreated. Meanwhile, the emo, revealing himself as Fan's master, told him that he couldn't eliminate him after the battle to avoid gossip, but at least he should be grateful for living 30 more days. Frustrated by his words, he thought about how annoying the man was before both of them resumed their attacks, resulting in a powerful clash of weapons. They fought at full speed, each of their strikes accompanied by huge flashes of light. The battle was evenly matched, fought among the graves in the cemetery. Tian backed away to avoid damaging the flowers his parents had left. The emo confirmed that he was Fan's master and that he came to take revenge for hurting him. He continued his monologue, saying that it was convenient to leave him in a cemetery, promising that he would send his body to join his parents soon and that his sister would join them too. While the protagonist gently took the flowers to return them to his parents' tomb, ignoring the annoying man, this finally managed to provoke the protagonist, who, filled with rage, moved at full speed and threw a sword into the emo's stomach. The emo couldn't withstand the blow and flew through the air. Tian followed him, caught him mid-air, and threw him toward the mountains, so far that he disappeared from sight. A massive dust cloud engulfed the area, caused by the impact of the emo's body, who could barely move. In agonizing pain, he recognized the protagonist, who approached with a sadistic smile. Later, Tian examined the emo's body and found an interesting book and a sword. However, as he looked at the moonlight, he realized it was too late, so he ran back to have dinner with his sister before she started complaining. Meanwhile, in the city, people strolled peacefully as Linz continued his facade as a janitor, cleaning the streets until Tian appeared behind him without a word. The protagonist continued his way, but when he turned, he remembered that it had been a month since Linz had started working, so he decided to invite him to his house for a glass of water. The old man smiled and accepted. Now, in the wolf household, Tian and Linz entered, surprising his sister, who was asked to prepare tea for the guest. Gale also got up and asked who the man was. He introduced himself as Linz from the Lin family. The captain didn't seem too interested until he remembered the famous elderly man, beginning to show admiration for him, which embarrassed Linz. While you prepared the tea, the captain, full of admiration, took the tea to go, surprising the girl. Linz sat down to drink tea, and when asked why he invited her so suddenly, Tian, embarrassed, asked a favor, to take his sister to Miss Lin of the Martial Pavilion. Linz was astonished that Tian was serious. Tian tried to convince her that it wasn't anything serious and that as long as he wasn't around, little Ian would protect her. This surprised her because the kitten was very strong. After pampering the kitten, she reluctantly accepted, knowing she wouldn't be convinced otherwise, and with a big smile, she told him to take care, leaving Tian both confident and a little worried. Meanwhile, at the new offices of the Sunin group, some guards complained about having to work at night, though no one would be foolish enough to cause trouble for the group. Just then, Tian arrived. The guards tried to throw him out with insults, but were sent flying in seconds, injured. When they asked why he was doing this, Tian calmly said that he was about to take out the trash. With alarms blaring, a man ran to inform the leader that their businesses had been attacked. This made the head of the Zun family, who was clearly very drunk, happy, as someone had finally arrived at the Linai base, and the cowards stopped hiding. The guards attacked as the leader headed toward Tian, who was still kicking people and defeating them all. The leader arrived just in time to see all his men injured and asked who was responsible, drawing the protagonist's attention. When the patriarch of the Zun family, Zun Kong, a great martial warrior of the Kingdom P, asked the protagonist's name, Tian calmly told him, surprising the elders who were behind him. Tian tried to react by pulling out his weapon, but one of the elders used a restriction technique to stop his weapon and tie his hands, making him fall to the ground, surrounded by the other elders, who seemed disappointed by having prepared so much to face a mere child. The elder with the restriction power told Tian he should be grateful for having fallen into their trap since few had seen such a technique. Some of them began inspecting the treasures Tian was carrying, while Kong said they could take them as a gesture of gratitude. Then, another man with a gloomy aura noticed the blade Tian had taken from the emo who attacked him earlier. Annoyed, he slapped the protagonist and interrogated him about the whereabouts of the elder Kong, Master Fun. Tian calmly let them imagine his fate. Worried, they decided to send a servant to find Fun and see if he was okay. As they wondered what to do with the protagonist, Kong suggested cutting his tendons and leaving him in a dungeon. While they dragged Tian, he activated his power, freeing himself from the restraints. With a quick move, he slashed the neck of Limo's friend. Alarmed, the veterans scattered. Among them, a girl was stunned by the strong, terrifying aura emanating from Tian. With that energy, Tian lunged directly at Kong, who was ready for battle, only to be caught off guard by an almost flawless move that ended in a brutal punch to the stomach, followed by an uppercut that sent him flying. Recognizing the protagonist's strength, Kong, desperate, ordered the others to attack. The first to obey was a muscular, extremely fast man who collided with Tian, managing to push him back. However, Tian quickly engaged in a fierce strength battle that shook the entire terrain, giving an opportunity for an elder to approach from behind using his magic negation technique. Tian reacted in time, sending both of them flying with a kick. Though the elder took the worst part, losing a few teeth, Tian confidently stated that he wouldn't fall for the same trick again, only to notice that his foot had been tied by a net. At the same time, a deathly stench began spreading among the subordinates, from which emerged two gigantic dragons led by a woman with a queen of hell appearance. Tian decided to retreat, realizing the situation was getting complicated. However, he didn't get far before a giant serpent dragon intercepted him with a deadly blast. Meanwhile, far away, from the martial pavilion, Ling saw a huge explosion, making her upset by the chaos happening in the city. That's when Sia arrived to inform her that Lince had gone to see her, although Ling hadn't planned to receive him until they told her that the master was bringing Tian's sister with him, which caught her attention. Downstairs, Lince and Yu waited while they drank tea with Yu, who was very worried about her brother, who at that moment collapsed, completely shattered. With no possibility of stopping, hitting the ground with force and appearing lifeless, everyone watched as they thanked the veteran Sulin, the demon woman who took care of the boy with her technique. Kong also returned to thank the girl, who was enjoying her achievement. Then the old man, who denied magic, asked what they would do with the boy, and Kong ordered them to kill him. However, before they could react, a dagger flew directly towards the old man, hitting him in the chest. Tian smiled upon seeing their confusion, using his regeneration talent. The group, confused by what had happened, looked at the old man's body hanging with the dagger in his heart. They realized Tian was still alive, and before they could react in time, the giant was buried headfirst in the ground, losing his life. Tian continued his attack, this time directly against the girl, who, unable to react, received a direct slash to the neck, killing her. Terrified by the fall of her most powerful fighters, she couldn't stand and collapsed to the ground. Alone, with no other option, she called for her axe and rushed toward Tian. He looked at her with hatred before easily finishing her off. In front of the newly arrived Fawn, who was shocked to see his father's body, the protagonist only showed a satisfied smile as he stomped on the body in front of Fawn. The latter, crying, rushed to attack, but Tian dodged easily, using his strength to land a blow that left Fan kneeling, nearly breathless. Unable to bear the difference in power, Fan looked at the protagonist as though he were a monster, and with no other options, he apologized to his father for his weakness before surrendering. Tian approached, determined to end his suffering, but just as he was about to finish him off, a huge lightning bolt forced him to retreat. Tian looked up in amazement toward the sky, where, between dark clouds, a powerful master appeared, arriving angrily, seeing the protagonist's ruthless behavior. Fan recognized him as Master Tao Yi and begged him to eliminate the protagonist for killing his father. The old man agreed, stating he would bring justice, and launched a powerful lightning bolt at Tian, who barely managed to dodge it. From there, he had to keep running to avoid the lightning that pursued him. The arrogant Grandmaster saw Tian as a mere ant that should be crushed, and Tian, with no other choice, had to escape quickly. Right in front of Fawn, he was struck by one of the old man's bolts, leaving Fan nearly scorched but still alive. He shouted at the old man to aim properly, and the old man apologized, thinking it was due to his age. Fan tried to surprise the old man with all his strength but encountered an energy shield that repelled him with a huge wave of energy, leaving him severely wounded and falling to the ground. Tian, now almost out of energy, admitted he should not have underestimated a grandmaster. He removed what was left of his shirt and prepared to fight with all his might. Seeing his status window, he noticed his lack of talent except for his high-level cultivation talent. Realizing that the old man was an ordinary grandmaster, he was advised not to interfere in things that didn't concern him, or he might end up badly injured. With Fan adding more fuel to the fire, Tian was surprised that he was still breathing. The old man attacked again, but Tian dodged, appearing behind him. Tao recognized Tian's speed and tried to surprise him with a brutal kick to the face, but Tao didn't even feel it, underestimating the boy. Tian activated his strength talent and sent the old man crashing into a building. Tao came out of the impact zone, surprised that his opponent wasn't ordinary. But before he could react, a car flew directly at him, using his powers to repel it and sending it flying toward Tian. He received a direct blow to the face, then was grabbed by the leg, dragged on the ground, and hit with a close-range barrage of lightning that flashed across the entire city. Tian was now defeated on the ground, under the sentence of Tao and Fawn, the latter congratulating the old man, who suddenly spat blood, realizing that he had also been injured. He ordered Fawn to kill Tian while he retreated to tend to his wounds. Fawn, terrified, began his task under the full moon, spitting on Tian's body and stomping on it, promising to turn him into dog food. However, with each blow, Tian began to react, slowly getting up in fury, surprising the cowardly boy, who screamed for help. But it was too late, and Tian eliminated him with the blade from his master. With the boy dead on the ground, the old man, who hadn't gone far, turned to find the protagonist healed from all his injuries. Looking brand new, recognizing the talent of Medusa, the old man was surprised and asked who Tian really was. Tian identified himself as a simple human who had awakened a weak talent. He then used the Zune cut technique, the wind breeze, which the old man recognized as impossible to dodge. Although the old man tried, he failed spectacularly, receiving the blows of the technique. He endured as best he could until he decided to enter steroid overload mode, promising to take Tian to the afterlife with him. However, 5 seconds later, a blow sent his head crashing to the ground. The old man cursed his luck, unable to do anything but receive a brutal kick to the face while he screamed for help. From above, unnoticed by Tian, the old man observed everything and confirmed that he had accepted the Iron Fang base as a guest, as long as they treated the base's members with respect. He then descended from the battlefield, revealing himself as a careless old man named Lu, nicknamed Old Lu. He also belonged to the Iron Fang base, although he didn't support his brother's extremist conquest ideas. However, for Tian, he was just another potential opponent. Though Old Lin had no intentions of getting involved in the fight, his indifference only enraged Tian further, who released more of his power and promised to take everyone with him. He activated his technique, focusing energy, which made the old man think that Tian was about to self-destruct. Considering it a brave act, he decided he'd rather eliminate him himself, so he launched a direct slash to Tian's neck, ending his life and triggering a massive explosion of energy that illuminated the sky. From the old man's perspective, it became clear that by eliminating a grandmaster, Tian had evolved, and now stood before him as a higher-level martial warrior. Seeing Tian radiating power, Old Lin decided that it would be better not to provoke him. Tian, without delay, asked Lu what he wanted. The old man admitted that Tao and his faction represented a line of descent that liked to oppress, while he and his group sought true justice and equality. Moving at an imperceptible speed, he asked Tian to end his war with the Zune family and leave the rest of the Iron Fang base in peace, promising that both bases would ally for mutual prosperity if Tian agreed. Tian, distancing himself from the matter, stated they should seek out the Lin family, the true leaders of the base, as he had no intention of getting involved in such problem. The old man accepted the proposal, and he watched as Tian quickly retreated, satisfied with the future he saw for himself. Meanwhile, at the Lin mansion, an old man was trimming flowers. This was Lin Wanla, the great warrior patriarch of the Lin family and father of mining. Just as he finished with the flowers, his son entered to inform him about the explosions in the city, revealing that the Sunan building had been attacked. The old man, incredulous, doubted this version of events, knowing that the Grand Master who had protected Rosen was almost invincible. However, his son explained that Tian was responsible for eliminating him, leaving his father completely astonished. Although surprised that such a large conflict had been resolved by a boy, Lin Wanla felt calm knowing that his base would be safer. However, Mansi informed him that the Iron Fang base specifically wanted to see him. The old man, who was already waiting and drinking tea, reluctantly decided to meet with the Grand Master. He ordered his family to ensure Tian and his sister's protection, and also instructed that if Tian wanted political power, he should be offered it, making sure not to offend him. Min immediately followed the orders. On the other hand, in the martial pavilion, Yellow was worried about his brother while the servant of the place offered more tea. This annoyed Gali, who, tired of the tea, asked about the pavilion's master. However, it seemed that she had no intention of coming down, which disappointed him since he wanted to meet the beautiful girl. The impatience of his student also grew while Linz calmly sipped his tea and assured him that both of them knew well how the pavilion master was. Just at that moment, the master's entrance was announced. Lin came down the stairs but was completely paralyzed upon seeing someone in the middle of the room who was basically her twin from another family. Surprised, the girl also stood up. Gali rubbed his eyes to make sure he wasn't hallucinating and said that they were identical. This left everyone, including the servant, thinking that they were lost twins. Lin was the first to greet the master and introduce her to Tian's younger sister, who was very nervous in front of the intimidating Lin. The latter, upon seeing her, was upset thinking that Tian had saved her just because she reminded him of his own younger sister. Humiliated by everything that had happened, she clenched her fists, greeted the girl, and then, with a coquettish smile, demanded that she call her older sister, leaving Yo completely confused. Meanwhile, in the streets of the martial pavilion, Tian was walking calmly until he reached the place where Lin was already waiting. Surprised to see her, Ling assured him that he would no longer lose track of the new leader of the Linai base, whom he called Lord Tian. The protagonist immediately began to look her up and down, although, in reality, he was looking at her state window, astonished that her talent had increased from high to superior in such a short time. He assumed this must be related to the treasure of the lake. Seeing her as an incredible girl, he continued staring at her until she went from being nervous to furious, scolding him for staring at her too much. He apologized for being distracted, and the girl calmed down, changing her attitude to ask if they could walk together, something he agreed to gladly. As they walked, they talked about how Lin's planned to help her join a political family, something Tian was not interested in at all. So, Lin asked what his next move would be. He explained that he planned to go to the maritime base, which created an awkward atmosphere since Ling felt there was a possibility he would leave, leaving her literally behind, until she noticed and asked him why he had stopped. And so, they continued walking until nightfall when they finally returned to the base of the martial pavilion, where his sister greeted him joyfully, hugging him tightly, which he found a bit clingy, but she just said she had missed him. Then he thanked his friends for looking after his sister while Lin and Sia entered. The first ordered her assistant to bring the elder and Song. Quickly, the elder spoke with her in a room, asking if she was sure about her decision. She seemed completely certain. The next day, in a warm atmosphere, Yu tried to convince her brother to stay and establish his own family, but he wasn't interested and simply thanked his friends for the car, while Lin confirmed that she liked the boy and added that if she were younger, she would accompany him. Meanwhile, Gale was surprised that Lin hadn't come to say goodbye, so staring toward the entrance with a certain feeling, he decided to stop waiting for her. And so, everyone said their goodbyes to the protagonist and Yayu until Lin appeared in sports clothes, walking directly toward the car, followed by Sia. Once inside, she asked them to hurry up and leave, leaving the protagonist astonished, asking if she was going with them. Annoyed, she replied that she obviously was. Tian had no choice but to accept, sending the girls to the back because Lin took the passenger seat. Before starting the car, he asked why she had decided to come with them, and she nervously answered, just because. Tian, amused by her answer, told her that if she wanted to go alone, she should just ask. She blushed and shouted that they were simply going in the same direction. So he decided to start the car, saying goodbye to his friends, who saw in him a bright future. On the road, Ling said goodbye to the Linai base for the last time, and thus their road trip began with discussions between Sia and Yuyu because Little Ian was quite annoying. Meanwhile, Ling told the protagonist that there would soon be an event at the maritime base related to the Secret Kingdom, something Tian had never heard of, which made Sia question how he had gotten so far without knowing about it. She explained that the Secret Kingdom was an alternative dimension related to the disaster from 100 years ago, and that it could be accessed through rare dimensional cracks where treasures that helped cultivation could be found. Tian, interested, asked if anyone could enter, and Ling replied that access was restricted to high-ranking martial artists, as entering with a lower rank would mean certain death. She offered him a position, but to give it to him, she would have to take it from the family, and Tian, grateful, refused since he didn't want to cause any problems. This enraged Lin, who started swerving while driving, and so they made their first stop. The protagonist refreshed himself and enjoyed the pleasant breeze before deciding to go check if dinner was ready. He found Lin, who continued to insist that he go to the Secret Kingdom, trying to convince him. However, Tian explained that while he was interested, he didn't trust leaving his sister alone, who was enjoying herself with Sia for the first time outside the Linai base. This made Lin laugh loudly, teasing the protagonist. She explained that if that was the case, the Martial Pavilion had a branch there where they would protect Yuyu. This convinced Tian, who happily expressed that he hoped they could participate together. Lin accepted but made him promise to stop being so indecisive. The protagonist agreed, although deep down, he was only thinking about how much money he could save. Upon returning, Sia asked them if they preferred to go slow to enjoy the trip or fast. Tian and Lin responded in unison, though with different moods, that any option was fine, which embarrassed both of them. Luckily, Yuyu gave the final vote, opting to enjoy the journey. Sia took this as the final decision, and the others responded in unison once more. Thus, their journey continued, enjoying the trip in a peculiar way with Sia, and Yu terrified while watching how Ling and Tian fought a giant monster. During the battle, the protagonist took the opportunity to copy a resistance talent, and later, the scene repeated itself with the girls terrified when facing a giant octopus. And Tian managed to copy a defense talent, and so 3 months passed until they finally arrived at the ship at the Demon Marina base, a large-scale base housing millions of people. The captain ordered the group to disembark at the base, and the group descended while the protagonist observed, surprised by how massive the base was compared to Linai. On the other hand, Lin was not surprised by Linai at all. She stretched her body when a car that was speeding suddenly braked in front of them. From the vehicle, a friendly man from the Martial Pavilion branch of the Demon Marina base got out and welcomed them, offering transportation. Tian observed the wealth of the pavilion while Ling insisted on taking you to the pavilion to rest, although you didn't want to leave her brother. She reassured her, saying she would be fine. Thus, despite being angry, she agreed to go with CIA, who practically pushed her into the car, which then sped off. This left Tian and Lin alone, both seeming ready for a great fight as they passed through the base, which was filled with helicopters flying overhead and heading toward a large concentration of martial warriors, who, according to Ling, were about to join the fun as spectators. The excitement began when, from the sky, an old man noticed a dimensional rift. Though it was small, the protagonist doubted it could fit through, but she clarified that they first needed to open it manually. At that moment, a person appeared from the ground, someone everyone recognized in awe, King Yugen, who soared through the skies, even exciting Lin. The protagonist watched with interest, reflecting on how much he still had to improve to surpass the Grand Master realm and become a king. Meanwhile, Yoon, a smiling bald man from the Jun family, continued rising, drawing the protagonist's attention as he observed the power of Yoon and what he would do with the spatial rift. Yoon pointed at the rift with a finger, creating a massive aura that amazed everyone. The secret technique took the form of a literal finger pointing at the rift, which he approached as if it were a nose to pick. He struck the rift, opening a huge hole in space, leaving everyone in awe. When he finished, he returned to the ground, earning admiration from all, while Tian watched carefully, curious about his talent. Checking his status window, the protagonist discovered that King Yoon possessed extraordinary cultivation talent and elemental spatial talent, which left Bien crossing his arms in surprise. Realizing that above all talents was the extraordinary rank, grateful for the opportunity, he moved his hand to copy that talent, and with the opening of the dimensional breach, everyone praised the king, who arrogantly walked through his followers. The protagonist observed it all, regretting not having copied the king's spatial talent, which he planned to get later. Ling handed him a locator watch and a spatial bag for his entry into the secret realm. She explained that once inside, they would be thrown to random places and needed to reunite quickly. She also made it clear that if he couldn't exit within the month the entrance would remain open, he would have to wait 10 years. Suddenly, a gigantic stomp shook the ground as a giant appeared behind the protagonist, calling him weak and doubting whether he had reached the master rank. This enraged Lin, as the giant, named Yu Xiao from her family, was being extremely rude. Xiao did not seem willing to stop, blaming the protagonist for his brother losing his place, continuing to intimidate and challenge him. Lin and Tian quickly passed by. Meanwhile, in the pavilion's car, driving at high speed, Yu was worried about her brother. Upon entering the secret realm, the protagonist fell painfully, feeling as though his backside was broken. He got up, looking around at the grim, red, and eerie place called the secret realm. Curiously, in front of him was a temple, and in its garden, he saw a plant similar to one that nearly killed him before. Upon closer inspection, he noticed many more, believing he had become rich and using the spatial bag to collect the harvest, eager to surprise his sister. He continued on, quickly encountering a poor guy who had been attacked just after entering. This made him realize he couldn't be too trusting and alerted him even more when the watch indicated that Ling was in danger. While she was surrounded by head-sized goblins, seemingly ready to finish her off, Tian ran through the temple at full speed, searching for her. Ling, finding herself alone, began to defend herself, standing tall and managing to counter one of the goblins' weapons and strike another. However, she was hit on the head and sent crashing to the ground, left with no options in front of a monster preparing to finish her off. At that moment, all she could think of was Tian until, out of nowhere, a crushing blow sent the monster flying. The young man appeared in front of them, telling her to stay behind while he took care of things. He immediately began exterminating the monsters one by one, striking, cutting, and hurting them until they were all eliminated. all while Lin watched attentively, unable to help but think that with this guy, her father's unfinished wish might be fulfilled. When it was over, the young man approached Lin and scolded her for being defeated by such weak creatures. However, she stood firm, explaining that she had encountered a high-level python beast, which had forced her to use secret techniques, leaving her exhausted and vulnerable to the goblin ambush. He continued, reminding her that while there were great treasures in the realm, there were also deadly dangers. While an incessant, heavy rain fell outside, inside the temple, Ling recovered by drinking a potion and focusing. Tian, on his part, asked if she knew what the most important treasure in the secret realm was and if she had any information about its location. She explained that the most precious treasure was the beta of the Vitality Stone, which just so happened to be the Yun family's goal. This surprised Tian, who remembered that this was the family of the king and asked what Lin's purpose was in this place. With a determined look, Lin confessed that her objective was the treasure left by her father, leaving the protagonist stunned. She then, almost fully recovered, recounted how her father had once found an important treasure guarded by a fierce beast with teleportation abilities. However, he never managed to obtain it, and this had become his main goal. Tian was especially excited, mainly after hearing about the teleportation talent. In contrast, Lin recalled that her father had warned her that the creature might possess a dangerous mid-level spatial talent. The protagonist had already set his eyes on this talent, and the girls, now fully recovered, were ready to continue. Tian, extremely interested, asked if she wanted to tell him more about the treasure, to which she agreed, trusting him as her companion. He explains to her that the treasure is called Flower of the Celestial Soul, an object capable of elevating a person's cultivation talent to superior levels. He describes it as an artificial mechanism to become a king, allowing one to easily take control of entire bases. This excites the protagonist even more. Lin clarifies that for this reason, she not only needs it but also the family does. He knows that he doesn't need to use it, but his sister does, so he asks how many of these flowers there are. She confirms that only 10 existed 20 years ago, but there might be fewer or more now. She remembers that, in any case, they will have to split them equally. He agrees, sealing the deal with a handshake, starting their new path in the rain, with her leading and him following. He thinks that although the flowers might sound interesting, his true goal is spatial talent, asking the girl if his father's plan from 20 years ago includes any countermeasures against the monster. She affirms this, showing him a strange piece that leaves the protagonist confused until she explains that it is a formation model disc created by a rune magician under his father's orders, who invested a lot of money in it. Its function is to reduce the effects of shadow teleportation. Tian is stunned upon hearing this, even more so when Lin tells him that, according to her philosophy, they believe nothing is invincible, just that their natural enemies with certain abilities haven't been discovered yet. With this, the protagonist reflects on what the enemy to his own talent could be. Then, Lin clarifies the flaws in his plan, explaining that the formation is so powerful that it gives them very little time to attack from a very close distance. She also explains that since he has already used his secret technique to survive, he won't be able to help in the fight. However, Tian confidently claims he will give his best, stealing a smile. As time passes, they travel a long way until suddenly, Lin unexpectedly stops, stating that they've arrived. They find themselves in front of a cave. He asks Lin if they will enter, but she stops him, wanting to activate the formation first to contain the creature inside. The monster sleeps comfortably among the remains of its victims until suddenly, it wakes up. Its mere presence alerts the protagonist, who watches as a huge flash appears behind him. Lin, terrified, confirms that they have been discovered as the creature charges toward them. In the presence of the furious celestial bat, Tian is excited. They are close to a medium-level spatial talent, so he sends Lin to prepare the formation while he distracts the creature. The girl moves away, and Tian receives a strong blow from the bat, leaving him injured and stunned by how different teleportation is from mere speed.